Australia used to have its own giants. Those were huge animals that could have dwarfed anything living on this continent these days. Scientists found the remains of many of those ancient creatures in the Naracoorte Caves in South Australia, 4 hours away from Adelaide. It's a lovely region, but it can be treacherous. Watch out for holes the ground is pocked with. Known as pitfall traps, many of them are no wider than a coffee table. They're deep and plunge into the darkest of caverns. One of such caverns is called Victoria Fossil Cave, and it's a treasury that's been hiding the bones of around 45,000 animals for centuries. Some of the oldest bones belong to creatures far more terrifying than any animal you can encounter today. Those were the ancient Australian megafauna, huge beasts that roamed the continent during the Pleistocene epoch. During those, there were giant snakes, huge flightless birds, wombat-like creatures the size of a rhinoceros, and many others. One of the largest examples of the Australian megafauna scientists have discovered so far is the Diprotodon. That giant herbivorous creature was 10 feet long and 6.5 feet tall, and weighed more than 6,000 pounds, about as much as a small Asian elephant. Even though this terrifying beast didn't eat meat, it could have smashed other animals with its sheer weight. Scientists have found the remains of hundreds of such creatures all over Australia, so it's safe to say that no other animal from that time or in that location was larger than this giant. Despite its creepy appearance, the Diprotodon was a relative to the modern-day wombat, and those are known to sometimes pounce humans. The Diprotodon had toes that pointed inward and were well suited for digging burrows. On the other hand, Diprotodon was a giant, and it was unlikely that it used to do so. It was likely a trait it had inherited from its smaller burrowing ancestors, or it could have used its claws to search for roots. This theory is supported by the fact that the animal's pouch was facing backward. It prevented any dirt from collecting inside while the creature was digging. Since this animal was so big, it didn't have to worry much about predators. Up until 60,000 years ago, when the first humans appeared on the continent, full-grown Diprotodons only had to look out for creatures like the Quinkana. Measuring in at a whopping 20 feet long, the Quinkana was a land crocodile. It lived in Australia from around 20 million to 40,000 years ago. It disappeared along with most other mega creatures of the last ice age. It's thought to be the result of the first humans coming to the continent. Even though the Quinkana was extremely fast and dangerous, it was possible that this creature got outcompeted by human hunters who took all available prey. Unlike modern crocodiles that are mainly aquatic, that mighty beast was a land dweller. Scientists figured it out by studying the Quinkana's legs. They were able to support and carry the body clear off the ground. It means there was no escape for ancient people once the Quinkana spotted them. Modern crocodiles can only push themselves along on their bellies. Such an adaptation allowed the Quinkana to chase its prey for long periods of time, exhausting it in the process. Another creepy feature of this ancient monster was its teeth. Aquatic crocs have conical teeth. Those are great for gripping and holding on to prey underwater. But Quinkana had knife-like teeth, ideal for slicing soft-bodied animals like mammals. Another Australian monster, Thylacoleo, wasn't all that large, but it didn't make it any less terrifying. It was still among the top predators and the biggest carnivorous animals in Australia. This creature was a true oddity of nature, even by prehistoric standards. First, its teeth resembled not those of a regular predator, but those of a rodent. Its front incisors were enlarged, taking the place of canines. Premolars were also shaped like blades. They were used for cutting flesh and bone. At first, scientists thought that Thylacoleo used those teeth to eat nuts and fruits. But later, a study showed that the use of such teeth was better suited on necks and spines. The jaws of this ancient creature were immensely powerful. A 220-pound Thylacoleo had a bite force similar to that of a present-day 550-pound lion. It means that the animal could easily bring down prey much larger than itself. Then there was Thylacoleo's tail. It had strong muscles which provided the animal with the ability to use the tail as support when tackling large prey. The Thylacoleo had retractable claws, and this feature is very uncommon among marsupials. It allowed the animal to keep its razor-sharp hooks from getting blunt and could help it get a better grip on its prey. Scientists are quite sure that, like today's leopards, the Thylacoleo could climb trees and jump on other animals from above. It was done so fast and stealthily, they never knew what hit them. The creature's rear feet support this theory. The first toe there was reduced, but the foot had a rough pad like what modern-day possums have. It allowed them to have a better grip while climbing. Right after scientists found the first skull of the Megalania, this animal was classified as a lizard. That's why its name translates to small groomer. But after they discovered more complete fossils, it turned out that the Megalania was a giant turtle. But that's not all. It was one of the largest land turtles to ever have existed. The main reason researchers initially believed the creature to be a lizard was the fact that its skull was adorned with a series of spikes. It's something the modern-day horned lizard can boast. But even after discovering the true nature of the Megalania, scientists still don't know how to properly catalog it. It might have been a creature that folded its neck under its spine, or it could have folded it to the side. Beside those defensive mechanisms on its head, the Megalania was also equipped with a spiked tail, which was probably used to prevent predators from attacking the animal from behind. Most species of the Megalania disappeared around 2,000 to 3,000 years ago because of humans who hunted them to extinction in both Australia and on the surrounding islands. It took around 2 centuries for these turtles to go extinct in that region of the globe. The Megalania was a giant Australian lizard that existed at the end of the Pleistocene epoch. It looked like a Komodo dragon and the Australian monitor lizard, which are both believed to be Megalania's closest living relatives. Fossils tell us that the ancient animal was anywhere from 15 to 26 feet in length. Ow! The youngest fossil remains of this ancient Australian monitor lizard date back to about 50,000 years ago. The first indigenous settlers must have encountered Megalania, which led to the lizard's extinction. Originally, scientists thought that the Megalania was the only member of the genus Megalania, but these days it belongs to the genus Varanus, which means that the prehistoric creature is closely related to other Australian monitor lizards. Our next giant creature on our list was once dubbed an ostrich on steroids. I mean, look at it. It was the last of the thunderbirds to go extinct in Australia. The Geniurus lived on the continent at the same time as early humans. They might have coexisted for 15,000 years or so before the huge bird eventually disappeared. This theory has some proof. The bird's fossils found along with human artifacts. Some cave paintings also depict flightless birds similar to the Geniurus in size and shape. Although it wasn't the largest bird in Australia, the goose-like creature was still as tall as a grown-up man and weighed around 550 pounds. Even a modern-day ostrich can be dangerous if it feels threatened. Imagine meeting its giant prehistoric relative. Scientists are still arguing about its diet. Many believe the creature was an herbivore, but there's still a chance that the Geniurus was a partial scavenger. Its small, stubby wings and powerful hoof-like legs hint that the bird could have been a plant eater. But its huge beak and exceptionally deep lower jaw evoke suspicion. Such features are highly unusual in birds. Now, our planet has gone through 5 mass extinctions. One of them was so bad, it wiped out over 95% of life forms on our planet. Scientists think they might have found the culprit: volcanoes. Scientists took some ancient rocks from a dozen global locations and found elevated levels of mercury, which was released by volcanoes millions of years ago. This points to volcanic eruptions as the probable cause of the Permian-Triassic extinction event. The mercury didn't just come from rocks, it was from the atmosphere. This means that when the volcanoes erupted, they released this poisonous gas into the air. They produced about 720,000 cubic miles of ash, vastly more than the infamous eruption of Mount St. Helens. The gas left a trace that marks one of history's most significant catastrophes, setting the stage for the age of dinosaurs. These eruptions most likely released mercury by igniting large coal deposits. Shallower waters showed mercury spikes right at the extinction's main horizon, while deeper sections recorded spikes tens of thousands of years earlier. This could mean that the effects of the volcanic activity and the extinction it triggered varied across different ocean depths. That means that the extinction was prolonged and complex. It not only caused significant climate warming at the time, but also led to some other toxic events, like acid rain, which made the situation even worse for plants and animals. Although few things have made it from the Permian period to the present day, we can get an idea of what the world was like back then from the fossils found in eastern Kansas. Now, 252 million years ago, the Earth was thriving. The Earth's continents were coming together to form the supercontinent Pangaea. The land was mostly dry, and the Earth looked like a harsh, arid desert, vast stretches of land with minimal water sources. The climate varied from scorching summers to frigid winters. There were some plants here and there, mostly conifers, large ferns, and primitive mosses in places with more water. The Earth was dominated by dinosaur-like creatures like pelycosaurs or therapsids, often called mammal-like reptiles. There was also the fierce Diprotodon, with its awesome snail-like spine. These three were the top predators of their time. Smaller reptiles and amphibians also populated the landscape, alongside burgeoning insects like beetles and dragonflies, which thrived during that dry time. But all the interesting stuff mostly happened in shallow tropical seas. Marine environments were bustling with life: rich coral reefs, shellfish called brachiopods, animals known as bryozoans, and large single-cell fusilinids, which kind of look like they're covered in moss. Small funny ammonoids were quite popular as well, often hanging out in the oceans alongside brachiopods, bony fish, and sharks. Creepy trilobites, ancient marine creatures that first appeared 500 million years ago in the Cambrian period, but then persisted up to the Permian period. Trilobites were very diverse, active predators to scavengers or plankton eaters. However, almost all these beautiful creatures were about to disappear during the Permian-Triassic extinction. Now, this extinction was truly ruthless. More than two-thirds of amphibian and reptile species disappeared, and nearly one-third of all insect species were wiped out. Usually, the insects are resilient survivors, which shows how catastrophic this event was. Among these extinct animals was the terrifying Meganeuropsis, a giant dragonfly with a wingspan of nearly 2.5 feet, once found in central Kansas near Elmo. This place is famous for its rich collection of Permian insect fossils, including ancient crickets and cockroaches. For a while, it was a mystery what exactly happened. Theories range from a massive asteroid strike and natural pollutants choking the oceans of oxygen, to dust clouds, to cosmic volcanic eruptions blocking the sun and cooling the planet. There was evidence for each of these scenarios, but the recent discovery points to the volcanoes theory after all. There's also a possibility that the reason wasn't just the volcanoes. NASA-funded researchers have recently uncovered what might be the fingerprints of this ancient perpetrator, or at least one of its accomplices. By investigating rocks around the globe, they've found evidence pointing to a massive asteroid strike as a possible culprit. They found unusual molecules shaped like soccer balls, known as fullerenes. These molecules contain rare gases that usually come from space. This suggests that an enormous space rock, perhaps as large as Mount Everest, crashed into the Earth, contributing to extinction. There seems like there might have been a series of catastrophic events. The volcanoes were spewing vast quantities of lava and gas that altered the climate, Pangaea was forming and disrupting weather and ocean patterns, and an asteroid decided to join in as the cherry on top. Lucky for us, nature is super persistent and always finds its way to be reborn. This just proves how resilient the Earth is. Now, what's interesting is this wasn't the only time that happened. The late Devonian extinction, which happened around 360 million years ago, is also tied to volcanic activity. Volcanic eruptions and the proliferation of land plants could have altered the nutrients flowing into the oceans. The Triassic-Jurassic extinction, which happened around 200 million years ago, a bit before the dinosaurs, might have also been a result of a volcanoes plus asteroid impact combo. And finally, about 66 million years ago, the last dramatic shift happened on Earth. Our planet went from the age of dinosaurs to the age of mammals. This momentous change is known as the KPG extinction. Just like the Permian extinction, it was a sudden event that ushered in new forms of life. And, once again, there are two major theories about what happened. The most popular theory tells us that the dinosaurs disappeared because of a massive asteroid. The Chicxulub meteorite smashed into present-day southern Mexico, creating the Chicxulub crater. The meteor was about 6 miles wide and hurtling towards Earth at incredible speeds. The impact was so powerful that it vaporized everything nearby instantly and released more energy than any other event in a billion years. The aftermath was catastrophic. Earthquakes shook the continents, and the ground itself heaved like a stormy sea. As the dust thrown up by the asteroid settled, it fell back to Earth like rain, heating up the atmosphere so much that forests worldwide burst into flames. Not far behind was a gigantic tsunami, stirred up by the ocean floor's upheaval, which swamped coastlines near the Gulf of Mexico. Not all dinosaurs perished immediately. In places like New Zealand, some dinosaur populations survived initially. However, a dark, ash-filled sky eventually covered the globe, blocking out the sun and plunging the world into cold and darkness. The long-term effect of the asteroid is what really sealed the fate for dinosaurs. Without sunlight, the food chain collapsed rapidly. Herbivores slowly disappeared, followed by the carnivores that depended on them, and the ash settling back to the Earth exacerbated the environmental upheaval, with fluctuating temperatures making survival tough. But there's another theory that says that, like with the Permian extinction, the asteroid was just the cherry on top. The dinosaur extinction was inevitable because of the volcanoes. Around 1 million years before the dinosaurs' demise, massive volcanic activity began under where India is today. This event created the Deccan Traps, a vast plateau formed from layers of lava that covered an area as large as France. For hundreds of thousands of years, these volcanoes spewed sulfur dioxide and carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. This turned the skies dark and the rain acidic, poisoning food sources and turning oceans into toxic baths. These changes were gradual but relentless, stressing ecosystems, breaking food chains, and leading to a slow but steady decline in many species, including the dinosaurs. Although it's not certain which theory is true, scientists now think that both were equally to blame. Maybe one day we'll have a clear picture of how the reign of the dinosaurs came to such an abrupt end. Now, if Earth's history were a movie, we humans would only take up the last second of the end credits. Our planet has been around for about 4.6 billion years, but our human story began about 300,000 years ago in Africa. Now our ancestors had some wild adventures in nature. They could have run into creatures so big they'd make today's elephants look like puppies. The woolly mammoth is a pretty famous animal, sure. His cousin, though, the Columbian mammoth, not so much. This giant used to roam places from Canada all the way down to Mexico. Unlike the furrier woolly mammoths, which hung out in colder places, these animals had shorter hair, resembling huge elephants. They also had incredibly large tusks, like 12 feet worth of spiraling, sturdy tusks. And they weren't just for show, they came in handy when facing predators. That includes our ancestors. If you think about sloths these days, you're picturing these adorably slow creatures. They couldn't possibly be in your list of most dangerous animals. Well, their grandparents might have. For starters, we call them ground sloths, and they vary a lot in size. Some were as big as rhinos, and others, like the Megatherium, were as colossal as elephants. Imagine seeing a 20-foot-long sloth which doesn't mind chewing on some meat every now and then, at least in theory. Ever heard of Bigfoot? Well, our next animal kind of looks like him, but is a distant cousin to orangutans. Meet Gigantopithecus, the largest primate to ever call our planet its home. Standing tall at 10 feet and weighing more than 600 pounds, these animals were amazing to look at in real life. Unlike Bigfoot, they weren't constantly hiding. In fact, it's believed they were peaceful and gentle creatures. Sadly, they faded away about 100,000 years ago, mainly because their food sources slowly became unavailable. Those lush, fruity forests they called home eventually turned into dry grasslands. Next on our list is the cave hyena. Weighing a chunky 250 pounds and standing 3 feet tall, these beasts were as long as a grown-up lying down. What's even more interesting about these creatures is that they loved hanging out in groups. A pack could be as big as 30 of these animals, which meant they could easily take on even the biggest, heaviest mastodons. Our ancient families would have needed to stay alert around these hungry specimens. Sadly for these hyenas, about 20,000 years ago, their numbers started going down. Soon enough, they completely disappeared from the planet. Quick pop quiz. What's called a tiger but isn't really one? It's the saber-toothed tiger. I mean, sure, they belong to the feline family, but they aren't technically tigers. First appearing around 42 million years ago, in July I think, many of their kind were gone before we even showed up. However, early Americans might have bumped into a couple of specimens from this group. If that really happened, it would have been quite the encounter. Think of the biggest wild lion today or the hefty Siberian tiger. These big cats also had some incredible features hidden in their fur. They were good at sneaking around, hiding, and pouncing on mammoths bigger than themselves. Their bite wasn't that strong, but they could open their jaws wide, like twice as much as a lion. And although their teeth were a bit on the weak side, they had buff forearms to pin down their dinner, giving those big fangs a purpose. Not the kind of kitty you'd want to play with. Dire wolves made their debut about 250,000 years ago. They were like the gray wolves we know today, but a lot stronger. While wolves these days stretch out to about 6 feet and tip the scales at 170 pounds max, dire wolves were about 5 feet and about 150 pounds. Found all over North and South America, they had admirable jaws, biting nearly a third harder than their modern counterparts. Also, their favorite snack was horses. But just like many other majestic beasts of the past, they faded away around 10,000 years ago. Now, names can be deceiving. Take the American lion, for example. It's not really a lion, it's more of a panther's big cousin. The other part of the name is correct, though. They did live in America about 330,000 years ago. This feline was no lap cat either. They were at the top of the wildcat pyramid, weighing a colossal 772 pounds. That's like stacking 4 grown men on a scale. Even the mighty African lion would look a tad bit shy beside these beasts. With the muscle to take down a bison, you wouldn't want to accidentally interrupt their dinner. They parted ways with this planet around 11,000 years ago, right after the last ice age. Now, down in Australia, about 50,000 years ago, I wasn't around then, there lurked a relative of the Komodo dragon, the megalania. Experts love to have debates on how big it was. Some say it stretched out to 23 feet. Others think it was just about 11 feet long. Either way, they were basically mega-sized Komodo dragons with a dangerous bite. If you think bears are already big and fluffy now, let's introduce the short-faced bear. While this big creature stood on its hind legs, it towered at 14 feet. With long limbs, they could outrun today's bears, hitting speeds up to 40 miles per hour. These ultra bears sadly disappeared around 11,600 years ago. Now imagine a crocodile. Okay, imagine that same crocodile, only supersized, with sporty legs, doing its thing in Australia about 1.6 million years ago. Well, say hello to the Quinkana. These crocs were extremely large, reaching 23 feet. And no, they weren't lazy river loungers. These creatures really love spending time on land. They evolved to have strong legs for their chases and razor-sharp teeth designed for slicing, not gripping. When did we stop sharing beaches with them? About 40,000 years ago. The name elephant bird might not sound familiar, but try to picture a bird that stood tall, as high as a basketball hoop at 10 feet, and weighed as much as a small car, 1,500 pounds. Their eggs were equally huge, like 150 chicken eggs bundled up into one. Now, as amazing as these birds sound, there's a lot we still don't know about them. They're hard to study, as most extinct animals are. Still, some recent studies have given us some clues. Scientists have been examining ancient molecules from their fossilized eggshells. It's an awesome piece of evidence, since these birdies' shells were thick, preserving precious DNA inside. Plus, there are tons of these eggshell fragments sprinkled all over Madagascar's beaches. Because of these findings, we now know these birds were herbivores and loved eating leaves and seeds. We also know the tiny kiwi bird is its closest living relative. Now, dodos were these amazing birds we also used to share the planet with. They're like distant cousins to ancient pigeons. To give you some perspective, imagine a chunky bird weighing about 50 pounds. Similar to chickens, turkeys, and ostriches, dodos were also the types of birds that couldn't fly. Their wings were small, and they had the muscle strength of, well, a wet noodle. Now, you might have heard the word dodo used as a name for creatures that aren't that bright. Don't get confused, though, by this name. These birds were in fact intelligent. Scientists were able to figure that out by studying their fossils. It turns out that they were good at smelling stuff, unlike most birds that are all about the visuals. These creatures aren't around for us to study anymore, but that might change. One evolutionary biologist is on a mission to fully understand these amazing ancient birds. On that note, she revealed that the dodo's DNA has been completely sequenced. There are even talks about potentially bringing dodos back to life. They would make a nice addition to the lovely beaches of Mauritius, the place they used to call home many, many years ago. Boom! An explosion of supersonic waves, interplanetary heat, dust, fumes. The Earth's atmosphere has been invaded by a cosmic rock the size of Everest. A few seconds ago, this rock, weighing trillions of tons, was hurtling towards Earth. It could fly from New York to Anchorage faster than you could fry yourself an omelet. This monster's name? The Chicxulub Incident. Epic name, right? 66 million years ago, it crashed into the Earth. Back then, dinosaurs ruled the planet, but not for long. The epic collision took place in modern Mexico, in the Yucatan Peninsula right near Cancun, where the dinosaurs were vacationing. Well, probably not. Still, the huge space rock hit the ocean, but even all that water couldn't stop the inevitable. The collision caused a huge amount of energy to be released. The horror on a planetary scale had begun. Imagine a mini-sun lighting up the surface of the Earth with tsunamis the height of the Statue of Liberty bursting from the epicenter of the watery impact. Not good. The blast blew through the surface of the Earth. It was as hot as an oven and burnt everything in its path. The impact provoked a colossal earthquake and serious volcanic activity. A bunch of volcanoes simultaneously released hot lava and ash into the prehistoric skies. Millions of tons of ash and soot poisoned the air. This formed a huge ash cloud in the atmosphere, which blocked out the sun's rays for several years. The long winter had begun. Only there wasn't any snow falling from the sky, but rain made of sulfuric acid. Yes, the Chicxulub incident might just be the most important thing that ever happened in the history of our planet. Even more than YouTube. Back then, there were loads of volcanic eruptions, a lot of flammable oxygen in the atmosphere, constant temperature changes. It was the perfect and worst time for all of this to go down. So, how are we so sure about all this? Well, the asteroid left an absolutely huge crater on the planet's surface. Today, this scar is hidden under the Gulf of Mexico. Scientists found a lot of places on Earth with abnormally high levels of iridium. This metal is very rare on Earth, but it's in a lot of asteroids that scientists have examined. Scientists studied some 66 million-year-old rocks. In the layers of rock, they found dust, the same dust that comes from asteroids. This could only have happened if a huge asteroid had crashed into Earth. The catastrophe led to the extinction of not only the dinosaurs, but also the asteroid. It was so hot at the point of impact, part of the asteroid just disappeared. A lot of water vapor and carbon dioxide shot up into the atmosphere. But the biggest problem, sulfur. It got kicked up by the asteroid impact and flew up into the air. These tiny sulfur particles blocked out a lot of the sun's rays. Without the sun, a lot of plants disappeared and the climate eventually got colder. The immense heat turned stones into glass. Scientists call these things tektites. The energy of the impact threw them up into the skies. After a short flight, the tektites fell down to Earth. But it wasn't pretty. Rain fell too, only instead of drops of water, you'd have seen hot glassy fireballs. They bombarded the planet's surface for days. The tektites set fire to everything. Scientists found evidence of this all over the world, not just near the collision site. But a lot of things from back then are still a mystery. Some scientists think that Chicxulub wasn't even an asteroid. It might have been a comet. Asteroids are mostly made of stone and metal. Most often they kind of look like a potato. A comet contains rock, metal, and ice. Comets look like dirty cosmic snowflakes, complete with ammonia, methane, and carbon dioxide. Comets sometimes come from the Oort cloud. It's a huge cloud of ice and debris around our solar system. From time to time, comets break free from the pack and head towards our sun. According to scientists, this special comet flew right past Jupiter. The gravity of that huge planet accelerated the comet even more. It flew towards the sun, gaining more and more speed. The comet's outer ice shield started to evaporate, and it probably gave off a lot of dust and gas, which made it look like it had a tail. The sun's gravity eventually shattered the comet apart. One of the fragments flew through space and crashed into the Earth 66 million years ago. So, asteroid or comet? The truth is, we'll never know. What we do know is that the Earth was seriously unlucky to be in its path, and it was never the same again. The catastrophe stopped the development of 75% of life on Earth. Some bigger marine animals, like crocodiles, turtles, and fish, survived the impact. Out of all land animals, the only ones to survive were the ones that were, on average, smaller than the modern raccoon. That includes a bunch of special species of dinosaurs, the ancient ancestors of birds. Scientists believe they survived for two reasons. After the huge impact, it took a long time for plants to start growing again, and a lot of animals didn't survive. Most remaining animals didn't have enough food. But these dinosaurs had a beak. With its help, they could split open nuts and dig seeds out of the soil, so they survived. The second reason is that these lucky guys had bigger brains. Some people think that they were able to cooperate with each other and quickly adapt to the new conditions. Other life forms survived too. Fungi and mold survived underground and underwater. Gradually, the darkness cleared away, and ferns began to take over the lifeless landscape. After a few thousand years, forests started to reappear. The animals that survived were pretty much all inconspicuous and small creatures. They lived in burrows, safe from all that hot ash. Before the collision, mammals had lived in the shadow of dinosaurs. But with all the dinosaurs suddenly gone, things were about to change. Mammals were able to take over. They began to dominate life, at least on land. Back to the moment when everything changed. Turns out, it wasn't the size of the asteroid that made it so powerful. It was more about the angle in which it hit the Earth. If the angle of impact had been different, the dinosaurs might have even survived the catastrophe. So, what would that have looked like? Well, let's travel back, way back. Oh no, there's a giant asteroid heading for Earth. Oh, wait, never mind, it missed. Whew. There are plenty of earthquakes, tsunamis, and volcanic eruptions every day, but dinosaurs don't mind that much. No big deal. Fast forward a few million years, and most of these ancient lizards have changed and are now unrecognizable. Thanks to a couple of ice ages, many dinosaurs are now totally covered with feathers to protect them from the cold. Mammals exist, but they're few and far between. You see a lot of bats in caves. There are tons of rat-sized rodents in the forests. During the day, they hide in the undergrowth or in burrows. At night, they go out in search of food. There are no horses, no elephants, or other large mammals. Why become large and eatable when there are so many dangerous reptiles with huge fangs around? There are no whales in the sea. Parrots, hawks, and pigeons are nowhere to be seen. But pterodactyls 2.0 whiz past you constantly. Some are about the size of a helicopter, while others are no larger than a swan. There are plenty of primates, but they're in no hurry to climb down from their trees and walk on two legs. No venturing out into the savannah, no evolution into Homo sapiens. In this alternate reality, open spaces are very dangerous. But then again, so are forests and trees. Nowhere is safe. To get some delicious primate treats, many smaller dinosaurs learned to climb trees. This was already happening back in the Cretaceous period, right before that huge asteroid just missed Earth. Whew, that would have been an epic collision. Dinosaurs have grown wiser since that near miss. Some are even as smart as a modern chicken. A large brain uses a lot of energy, and that's not always a good strategy for survival. Safer to keep brains small and keep making those teeth bigger and pointier.
Meganeuropsis was a giant dragonfly that lived on our planet almost 300 million years ago. It was about the size of a modern-day falcon, with a wingspan as long as your leg. It had long and sharp claws that it used to catch food and for protection. They could even grab small animals and carry them through the air. Their speed and maneuverability made them formidable hunters. Meganeuropsis is the most giant insect ever found on Earth. Scientists believe it might have reached this colossal size because there used to be more oxygen in the air. There were other gigantic insects that lived before the dinosaurs too. Some ancient ants could grow to the size of a hummingbird. And if that wasn't scary enough, they could also spit acid, like something out of a movie. These ants lived in large colonies, and their anthills were several times bigger than the ones we see today, and could resemble a bear's den. This thing is an Arthropleura, an ancient ancestor of the giant millipede. This monster dwarfed the last two animals, growing to the length of a car. It lived in rainforests, and it could move at great speed. Imagine being chased by one of these. Fortunately, Arthropleura weren't carnivores like today's centipedes. They only ate plants. Another reason the insects grew so big back then is that there was less direct competition. They could evolve and grow without being eaten by more successful animals. Brontoscorpio lived about 400 million years ago and could reach 3 feet in length. That's 15 times longer than modern scorpions. And unlike modern ones, it had not 2, but 4 claws. This amazing creature could also breathe on land and underwater. That's because it had both gills and lungs. It's believed that these guys were some of the first to evolve and change their habitat from water to land. Now, onto a far stranger marine animal, Anomalocaris. It's thought to be the very first predator to live on our planet. It was half the length of a human, their eyes had color vision, and they were likely the most advanced of any living organism 500 million years ago. They used their sharp claws and mouth parts for hunting trilobites, crabs, and sea scorpions. It's possible that Anomalocaris was what eventually pushed crabs and scorpions onto the land. They might not look very similar, but Anomalocaris was also an ancient ancestor of modern crabs. Dunkleosteus was an enormous ancient fish. These guys were half the length of a school bus and weighed the same as a small car. They had no teeth, but evolved to use the bone plates on their jaws as a replacement, leading to their crazy appearance. This allowed them to have the biting power of a modern Mississippi alligator. Most impressively, it could close its jaw multiple times in less than a second. This created a powerful flow of water right into its mouth. Smaller fish would get caught in the current and pulled right into a Dunkleosteus' mouth. Their skull was heavily protected by bony armor. It was like it was wearing a helmet. This protected it from almost any strikes and made it the apex predator of its time. Achmonistion is the ancestor of all sharks in existence, living around 340 million years ago. No one knows why, but in addition to the usual shark fin, it had something that looked like an anvil on its back. Another feature of the Achmonistion was a massive spike on the underside of its body. It was very sharp and covered with many teeth. Tiktaalik were some of the first animals to set foot on land. It had gills and scales, like a fish, but it also had some of the features of land animals. It looked a bit like a cross between a fish and a lizard. Its front and back fins began to turn into limbs, so it could crawl along shorelines, and it developed lungs as it spent more time out of the water. This weird fish may be the ancestor of pretty much every modern land animal today, including us. Back to land, this is a Dimetrodon. It looks like a lizard, but it's actually a synapsid, a close relative of mammals. It was the size of an alligator and had a giant sail on its back. Scientists aren't certain, but it's believed that the Dimetrodon used this sail to get heat from the environment faster. It also helped them camouflage themselves in the tall grass. These guys are often confused with dinosaurs, but they disappeared 40 million years before the first dinosaurs appeared. Over time, synapsids evolved into full-fledged mammals, and if we go further down this chain, we'll find out that humans evolved from these guys too. Dinocephalians. The name of these guys literally translates to scary-headed. This is because, in the process of evolution, their skulls became much thicker. These creatures were usually 19 feet long and weighed the same as a car. Some of them had long fangs like a saber-toothed tiger, but these giant lizards were herbivores. That doesn't mean that they were completely peaceful and docile, though. Scientists believe they fought within their species. They smashed their heavy foreheads into each other, like rams do now. Dinocephalians existed at a time when all our continents were still connected in a supercontinent, called Pangaea. Gorgonopsia looked a little like Dinocephalians, only these guys were carnivores. They were about the size of a wolf, but they spent a lot of time in water too. They usually lived on coastlines and could dive into the sea looking for food. They were also the first predators that could run fast. This is one reason why Gorgonopsia ruled the world about 265 million years ago. Later, these species mysteriously disappeared, leaving the dinosaurs to dominate the Earth. The cause of the mass extinction about 240 million years ago is unknown, but the second event that caused the extinction of 95% of all living organisms on Earth was a giant meteorite. The oldest tree remains are 385 million years old. Archaeologists found them inside a rock, where there were traces of the roots of many species of trees. These ancient trees evolved and began to turn the carbon dioxide in the air into oxygen. Gradually, they created the atmosphere we have now. This is the oldest winged insect in the world, Rhyniognathus. It's about 400 million years old, and there's still debate about the way it lived. Supposedly, it fed on plants, but it also might have eaten other animals. The oldest species of millipede is Pneumodesmus pneumani. It may have been the first living organism to breathe on the barren Earth, around 400 million years ago. This little guy was only as long as a seed, but we only have one fossil, so they might have grown a bit bigger. Pneumodesmus might be a distant relative of all the millipedes and centipedes that exist today. The farther we go back in time, the more bizarre the living organisms look. 480 million years ago, Agirocassis coasted through the ocean. For its time, it was the largest animal on the planet, reaching 6.6 feet in length. Fortunately for other sea creatures, it wasn't a scary hunter. It ate the same way that the blue whale does today, swallowing loads of water so it could catch all the tiny things living in it. Dickinsonia lived 550 million years ago. These floating ovals varied a lot in size. Some could be the size of a fingernail, while other species were as big as a kitchen plate. The largest Dickinsonia may have been as wide as a stingray. These animals are so primitive that they didn't even have a skeleton. Some scientists thought it wasn't even an animal, but a fungus. But that was later disproven. Charnia was another animal that scientists originally thought was a plant. They believed that it was just the leaf of something like a fern. They realized that it was an animal when it was found that Charnia lived deep underwater, where photosynthesis is impossible. These guys swam near the bottom of the sea and fed on nutrients from the water. Instead of a traditional digestive system, these things had filters. They ran water through them to catch food in it, like the Agirocassis. The first living organism is thought to have appeared about 4.2 billion years ago. When the oceans first formed, they were filled with things needed for life to exist. Under high temperatures, this matter began to interact and join together, forming the first living organism. This is why we look for planets with liquid water. We know life on Earth started with water, so many people believe that water is the most important factor in the origin of life.
Dinosaurs are some of the most fascinating creatures to have ever walked Earth. It's a shame that we won't be able to have Jurassic Park, where we can see some of the coolest creatures come to life. But we are actually living with some creatures that are just as old as dinosaurs, such as crocodiles and sharks. They haven't changed much since they appeared millions of years ago. But most dinos didn't make it when the asteroid struck Earth. In a way, the asteroid was a giant reset button for the planet. After hitting Earth, this space traveler wiped out almost every living thing. The sky was covered with ash, which blocked out sun rays. That meant that plants couldn't grow, and this made a lot of herbivores, really hungry. As a result, they had to change their diet and adapt to the new changes. This forced some of those dinosaurs to take on a new path in life, turning into some modern animals we know today. If the asteroid had changed its course just a bit, then dinosaurs would have remained the dominant species. So, what would have happened if dinosaurs had stuck around? Well, first of all, evolution would have played out differently for them. Maybe during those millions of years, humans would not have evolved to be on top of the food chain. Imagine a world where dinosaurs still existed today. If dinosaurs had evolved as humans did, then we'd have to compete with them. There were multiple species of humans, but Homo sapiens, also known as us, prevailed. A humanoid dino, or dinoid, would be something strange. First of all, they would look different, more reptilian than us. Our brain sizes would differ, and they would be physically bigger and stronger. Putting a human and a dinoid side by side would be interesting. First of all, dinoids would have scales as opposed to human skin, and their teeth would be sharper. They would probably not have 5 fingers on each hand, and their nails would be sharp claws. Also, we don't know what they would sound like, but they'd possibly be guttural like crocodiles. Dinosaurs had very good vision compared to mammals, so it's possible we'd see dinoids with large eyes. The population of Earth has reached a staggering 8 billion people, and we've changed our environment to suit our needs. With that said, if dinoids were the dominant creatures, then the environment would be suited for them. Speaking of physical features, scientists predicted what dinoids would look like if they had evolved into intelligent creatures that walked upright and had opposable thumbs. These wiggly thumbs are important for evolution, since they helped humans start using tools for defending themselves and hunting. The creature may not look like the ideal reptile, and its appearance might not be flattering. But if dinosaurs had evolved, then these creatures could be your classmate or colleague at work. Not all dinosaurs were alike, as their fossils have shown. Some were gigantic, while others resembled any modern-day animal. The biggest land-walking dinosaur was the titanosaur, although the measurements are only rough estimates based on fossilized bones. It's estimated that the dino was around 122 feet long and lived between 100 to 95 million years ago. It was so massive that its weight was equivalent to 18 modern-day elephants. There were dinosaurs all over the world in different time eras, climates, and landscapes. However, only a handful were known as giants. But though they excelled in body size, they lacked in brain size. Some of the most well-known dinosaurs, like the Allosaurus and Stegosaurus, had very small brains, like me, which means it would have been nearly impossible for them to properly evolve into intelligent beings. Tell me about it. But in the late Cretaceous period, the T-Rex roamed the land. It had larger brains than its Allosaurus counterparts, which were millions of years behind. Even so, the T-Rex's brain only weighed just under a pound. A human brain is nearly 3 pounds. It might have been cool to see a T-Rex evolve into an intelligent being with opposable thumbs on its tiny stick hands. Contrary to popular belief, the T-Rex was actually quite slow, and a human could have easily outrun it. So, we know that these days, they wouldn't belong in any competitive sports that involve running. We know that dinosaurs could be herbivores and carnivores. But throughout their evolution, one thing remained the same: they had small brains. Other forms of dinosaurs were around too, such as long-legged and horned dinosaurs. Either way, they were on top of the food chain even when little mammals had cameo appearances. We have to consider that when the asteroid struck and wiped out dinosaurs, mammals took over the scene. If dinosaurs and mammals had shared the dominant position in the food chain and had followed a similar path in their evolution, then today's reality would be completely different than what we have now. Dinosaurs would have bigger brains and would compete with humans for the title of the smartest creature. One of the reasons why humans and parrots can talk is because of the strength and shape of our tongues. The evolved dinosaurs would have a different skull, shaped to fit such a tongue if they wanted to talk like humans. One of the reasons why humans made it to where we are now is because we evolved to stand upright to detect predators. This was one challenge we had to overcome in order to survive. But what would dinosaurs need to challenge if they were already the most dominant creatures? Some of the big-brained dinosaurs had long legs, which means they could run fast, detect predators, and grab food that otherwise would be beyond their reach. Their evolutionary path would be very different from that of humans, and maybe even more advanced. Their brains could have evolved into something impressive. They could turn out smarter than us and possess quicker reflexes. Imagine dinosaurs discovering gravity instead of Isaac Newton, or a dinosaur writing plays and poems better than William Shakespeare. Imagine dinosaurs possessing the creative knowledge to produce some of the finest art in history. Music and cinema would revolve around dinosaur culture, and fashion would look otherworldly. We would live in peace with dinoids, but we would certainly compete with them. The World Cup would feature dinosaurs and humans playing for their national teams, but clubs would be exclusively human or dinosaur. Some professions would be dominated solely by one species, and more physically demanding jobs would be taken by dinosaurs, like laborers and security guards. Eventually, dinosaurs would take over the world since they would be physically stronger than humans and would have better advantages than us. Humans, on the other hand, would need to figure out a way to keep up with dinosaurs. Mammals had a different path of evolution, where they never became gigantic super beasts as dinosaurs did. Instead, their brains developed and grew big. But even though humans are the smartest creatures on the planet, we don't have the biggest brain. Animals like orcas, whales, elephants, and other apes have bigger brains here. So why are we smarter than them? The answer is we don't know. The brain is the most complex organ we have, and we know so little about it. We don't even know exactly why it's so complex or why it behaves like that. Today's dinosaur descendants, like crows and parrots, have complex brains, which allows them to communicate, use tools, and even count. Bigger doesn't always mean better in this case. A parrot's brain is smaller than a cat's, but it's far more complex and intelligent than that of any feline out there. Some scientists argue that dinosaurs from the movies aren't 100% accurate, and that they used to have feathers. In terms of evolution, some small feathered dinos might have followed the path of primates. They might have evolved into a tree-dwelling primate that may also have followed the path of becoming another species of human. Hundreds of dinosaur species roamed our planet, and researchers give a name to a new type approximately every 2 weeks. It's not fair to stick to T-Rex, Stegosaurus, Spinosaurus, and other famous sauruses all the time. They've had their chance to shine in the movies and across the internet. So let's check out dinosaurs that no one talks about. First on our list is Torosaurus. The special thing about this dinosaur is that it definitely had one of the largest skulls ever found. It was big because of this frill going from the back of the animal's skull and covering its neck. The frill wasn't there for protection. It was probably just to show off a bit. The bone in the frill was thin and full of holes. As you can see, it's very similar to Triceratops. There are still debates about whether these two are the same species, but more and more studies show that they were more like cousins. They were probably similar in size, but Torosaurus had a longer head with big openings, as well as longer frill bones with a groove on top. It also had more pairs of horns on the back of the frill. Some like to call Torosaurus a bull lizard. These fellows were plant eaters that may have lived in social groups. They existed at approximately the same age, but Torosaurus somehow ended up on the less popular side of the family. Kentrosaurus was a small stegosaurus. It's one of the least cuddly dinosaurs of all time. Its long, thin spikes seem to be a pretty good defense mechanism. Stegosaurus, on the other hand, had shorter, thicker spikes that were less likely to bend or snap when the animal used them. Now, you wouldn't want to get anywhere near Kentrosaurus, though. Its tail could swing in a big half circle and hit with a force strong enough to break a human skull. Any volunteers? No? Okay. One scientist used scans of the dino's fossils to make a computer model of its skeleton. The model showed that Kentrosaurus had a flexible neck. It must have been really useful for looking around to see if something interesting was going on or if there was any dangerous animals trying to sneak up. Kentrosaurus typically walked on all four legs with straight hind limbs. The computer model tells us it could spread its front legs out to its sides, too. Maybe it was a way to protect its belly during fights. Stegosauruses, in general, had tails that were like big weights at the back of their bodies. That's why their balance point was closer to their hips. That's also the reason why they could easily stand on their hind legs and swing their tails around. So most people haven't heard of Heterodontosaurs, even though their fossils show that dinosaurs got feathers way back before we thought and in groups where we didn't expect it. In 2008, paleontologists identified the first known skull of a baby Heterodontosaurus, which was less than 2 inches long, smaller than a tea bag. This baby dinosaur had relatively big eyes and a short snout compared to bigger ones of its kind. Now, what's really interesting is that some scientists used to think that Heterodontosaurus's tusks, like those of modern warthogs, only appeared when they were fully grown. But it seems they had them from the early stages of their life. Heterodontosaurs had 5 fingers on each hand, 2 of which were opposable. It was a good tool, considering the animal probably ate both plants and meat. Humans have different types of teeth, some for biting, some for chewing, and also canines. But most reptiles have just one kind of teeth. Heterodontosaurus was special because it had 3 different types of teeth: small peg-like ones, big teeth resembling canines, and square-shaped teeth that did the cutting job. Scientists are not entirely sure how this creature used these different types of teeth. Maybe it was for digging up roots, breaking into termite nests, or even defending themselves against dangerous animals. Okay, say this name with me now: Psittacosaurus. She was quite a common dinosaur in its time, but she never still gained popularity. Scientists found out that when these dinosaurs were young, they probably crawled, considering they had longer arms and short legs. But as they got older, between 4 and 6 years old, their hind legs started growing much faster and became much longer than their front legs. So, later in life, they likely didn't move on all fours anymore, but walked on 2 legs. Inside the stomach of one of these creatures, scientists found pebbles. This shows the animals either had a hard time digesting what it ate, or it didn't chew its food very well. Its beak looks quite familiar. That's how it got its specific name, a parrot lizard. It was really strong, and some believe the creature used it to crack and open tough nuts and seeds before the pebbles in its stomach helped mash them up for digestion. These guys might have been good at swimming. They had broad feet, and the shape of their tail could have helped them move in the water relatively easily. Some scientists even believe they might have spent most of their lives swimming in rivers and lakes. In 2004, researchers found something really sweet: 24 young parrot lizards huddled together. They were too big to be hatchlings, so it could be a bunch of teenagers who had left their nests and then formed a group where they could support one another and defend themselves better. But apparently, that plan didn't work out so well. Now, check this one out: Stygimoloch, or as they call it, Styx demon. We're looking at a peaceful plant-eating creature with bony spikes and knobs on its skull. Most scientists believe it was a younger form of this fellow, even though they used to think they were a separate species. Stygimoloch is smaller than its more popular cousin, but it's also more robust and has a pretty thick neck. This dinosaur, with small forelimbs and long hind legs 3 feet high, which is half as high as an average human. That doesn't sound dangerous in the world of giant and fierce dinosaurs, but the animal had a very thick skull roof. Maybe it wasn't the strongest tool to defend itself, but it probably helped in combat with rivals from its own species. They most likely headbutted to win the hearts of their chosen ones. But rivals from its own herd were a piece of cake compared to the predators that might have gone after it. After all, this dino lived at the same time as old T-Rex. Now, when someone tells you to picture a dinosaur, Chisaosaurus would probably be the last thing coming to your mind. It looks as if you've put together pieces of random animals and tried to make your friends believe this truly was a real animal that once roamed the earth. But it's actually a dino, with giant sharp claws on its forelimbs, a bulky body, and a long neck ending with a tiny head. Now, don't let the claws scare you though. These creatures didn't go after other animals since they were herbivores, but these claws could protect the animal from intruders and predators. The full scientific name of this creature describes it as a giant sloth-like reptile from China. This animal was one of the biggest and oldest members of the group where it belonged, which lived around 115 million years ago. No, I wasn't around then. At first, it was hard to tell which animals were related to this weird-looking dinosaur. But in the 1990s, scientists made a conclusion that they were modified plant-eating theropods, which is similar to carnivorous dinos. They also most likely had feathers and small wings, like some sort of a very big turkey. Tiny critters to colossal creatures, all animals are trying to escape from a wall of fire moving in their direction. The temperature is rising, and everything around starts catching fire. Soon, lots of animals and plants on Earth will cease to exist. This is the aftermath of a giant asteroid crashing into our planet. But what if dinosaurs had had critical thinking skills? They could have guessed what was going to happen, because this asteroid was visible a year before the impact. 1 year before the impact. With no city lights, all bright spots in the sky are stars. Some of them are planets reflecting the light coming from the sun, like Mars. But one of these dots is the asteroid. Later, it's going to be known as Chicxulub impactor. It got this name because of the region of modern-day Mexico where it fell. Anyway, at this point, the asteroid looks like a star. It has the same brightness as Neptune. You could even have photographed it with a high-quality camera. If only dinosaurs had thumbs. The impactor is now passing through Jupiter's orbit. From this distance, Earth looks like a pale blue dot. 1 month before impact. The asteroid has become much brighter. It's now the most brilliant spot in the night sky after the Moon. The asteroid crosses the orbit of Mars. Its tail, consisting of dust and gas, is getting longer and longer. It's now as long as 2 times the distance from Earth to the Moon. 1 week before the impact. The intruder's tail is now 5 times the distance from the Earth to the Moon, but the dinosaurs can't appreciate its beauty. To them, it's just another bright dot in the night sky. If this asteroid were flying toward Earth right now, scientists could pinpoint the exact location of its impact within a mile. Then we would evacuate people from the impact area and avoid a major catastrophe. 1 day before the impact. The Chicxulub impactor now holds first place among the brightest objects in the sky. The light surrounding it, called a halo, seems even bigger than the Moon itself. The asteroid is now passing through the Moon's orbit. It looks like a bright spot that leaves an ashy trail behind it. 1 hour before the impact. The light from the Chicxulub impactor is brighter than the full Moon, and its movement can be seen with the unaided eye. Nights on Earth aren't dark anymore. Only now, dinosaurs begin to feel anxious. All animals on Earth start to seek shelter. 10 minutes before the impact. The asteroid is now passing through Earth's orbit. Thousands of small fragments from its tail begin to fall on the planet. It looks like a meteor shower. So far, these fragments are too small. They all burn up in the atmosphere before reaching the surface of the planet. The asteroid is approaching South America. If someone was looking at it from Europe, it looked like a sunset. The bright dot of the Chicxulub impactor is falling behind the horizon. 2 minutes before the impact. Dinosaurs can now easily see the asteroid's shape. If they knew how to do it, they could even estimate its size. It's a bit more than 6 miles across, which means it's almost the size of Manhattan Island, and the giant's weight is 15 plus 15 zeros pounds. It's flying toward the Yucatan Peninsula at a mind-boggling 7.5 miles per second. At that speed, you could get from New York to Los Angeles in around 10 minutes, but you'd kind of burn up on the way. 10 seconds before the impact. The Chicxulub impactor is now approaching the ground. A few more feet and bam! The night sky suddenly turns white. The flash is so bright that the sun isn't visible at this point. The asteroid's entry causes a powerful blast that can be heard on the other side of the world. The huge asteroid begins to burn because of friction with the air. It heats up and splits into many pieces. These pieces shower on Earth. After a few seconds, the largest part of the meteorite hits the ground. Its mass and speed provide the Chicxulub impactor with an enormous amount of energy. In the next moment, a super powerful explosion shakes the ground. The blast wave from the meteorite begins to spread out from the impact site. It rips out huge chunks of soil and trees and then pushes them to the ground like dominoes. The temperature of the blast wave is so high that everything around the impact site catches fire. The energy released during the collision also penetrates deep into the planet. This causes the strongest earthquakes in our planet's history. They in turn generate tsunami waves as high as the Empire State Building. 5 minutes after the impact, the meteorite leaves behind a huge crater. It's as wide as Lake Huron and deep enough to fit inside 2.5 Mount Everests. Dinosaurs are running around in panic. They try to evacuate toward North America, but most of them don't make it through unfamiliar swampy territories. Another danger is the ongoing meteor shower. Hundreds of tons of ash and debris rise into the air. Heated up by high temperatures, they fall to Earth in the form of liquid lava. Ash and smoke fill the atmosphere and block the sun's rays. Earth plunges into darkness. For several more weeks, our planet will be totally dark. Acid rains will fall on its surface non-stop. There was a lot of sulfur in underground deposits on the Yucatan Peninsula. The energy of the explosion evaporated all this sulfur. Now it's cooling in the air, gathering in clouds, and dripping to the ground. Most animals survive the impact, but the mass extinction continues for many more months. The collision has plunged Earth into darkness, and this has wiped out most of the plants that fed on sunlight. The plant-eating dinosaurs have lost their main food source and begin to disappear. But plant-eating dinosaurs are the main diet of meat-eaters, and now dinosaurs like T-Rex have nothing to eat. Soon, they go extinct too. In other words, it wasn't a meteorite that wiped out dinosaurs, but hunger and climate change. Meteorites of this size fall once every 100 million years. It means that such an event might happen again. Will humans manage to survive this disaster? These days, we can look out far into space, and the appearance of an asteroid the size of the Chicxulub impactor won't be a surprise to astronomers. In general, asteroids that are more than 460 feet across are considered potentially dangerous. Anyway, if we know about the approaching space body, we'll be able to build shelters filled with food and water supplies. Once the asteroid is close enough, we can wait for the impact and its consequences inside. But when people come back to the surface, they'll see cities and towns torn down. Our planet will look like a lifeless desert. That's why we need another alternative, which is to prevent the impact. Here, we have many options depending on the size and material of the asteroid. According to NASA, the most effective way is a kinetic ramp. We'll need to send a fairly large and heavy object, such as a spaceship, into space. When it approaches the asteroid, scientists will choose the perfect trajectory, and the ship will crash into the space body. A powerful collision will change the asteroid's course, making it fly past Earth. The further this space body is from our planet, the easier it'll be to send it away. Another option is a controlled explosion on the surface of the asteroid. Newton's first law of motion will help us here. It says if a body is moving at a constant speed in a straight line, it will keep moving that way unless it is acted upon by a force. So, if we make a big enough explosion, or force, the asteroid will shift its trajectory. How much it moves depends on the amount of force applied to it. We can also blast the asteroid right from inside. In this case, there will be no need to change its trajectory. Instead, we'll try to turn one huge hunk of rock into a bunch of smaller fragments. They will burn up in the atmosphere and do no harm to our planet. Another way is a gravity tug. Every heavy object has its own gravitational force and gravitational field. Our goal will be to send a spacecraft to the asteroid and make it fly close to the intruder. The asteroid will attract the spaceship, but its engines will resist. As a result, the ship will slowly but surely pull the asteroid toward itself. This method will take much longer, but gradually, the trajectory of the asteroid will change and it won't crash into Earth. Hopefully. We can also use solar power. We can build a spaceship with a system of giant magnifying lenses. Then we'll send that station closer to the Sun. When we spot an asteroid, we'll point the lens in its direction and focus the beam on the space body. The heat from the Sun will cause the asteroid's material to evaporate. Eventually, this will make the intruder change its trajectory. Now, we as human beings have faced all sorts of challenges: ice ages, tough diseases, squabbles over real estate, and so on. But let's try to go way back to 400 million years ago, to the times when our oceans were ruled by sea creatures and the lands barely had any animals on them. Do you think you'd be able to survive there? We're talking about the Devonian period. It started around 400 million years ago and lasted really long, about 60 million years. It's named after Devon, England, where scientists first studied rocks from this time. The world was quite different then. Our planet featured 3 continents: a gigantic supercontinent, Gondwana, down south, a smaller one called Siberia up north, and another medium-sized one called Laurasia to the east. These landmasses were moving around and crashing into each other, making big mountains. Now, imagine if your time machine broke down and you ended up in this ancient world. You're now in a world where the land is pretty much a barren wasteland. You are surrounded by basic plants like mosses and ferns. This is the early Devonian period. There were no trees yet, but moss was everywhere. And wow, that's a lot of water! Around 85% of the Earth was covered by oceans during the Devonian, so you see many warm, shallow, oxygen-depleted lakes around you. The first thing you notice is that breathing seems a little harder. Well, don't panic. It's all because of lower oxygen levels, around 19%. It's still enough to ignite fire, and trust me, you'll need one, but prepare to feel a bit dizzy. Luckily, there are no huge predators to run away from, but you'll probably have to do a lot of swimming. Alright, at least the weather seems pretty nice, warm and steady. If you keep traveling, you'll notice that the land seems almost limitless. That's because we're on Gondwana, the biggest supercontinent of them all. Since the tectonic plates don't move around much, there are barely any mountains around, and the Earth actually feels flat. Well, not totally flat. Gondwana boasted a gigantic mountain range, akin to the Himalayas. This range was gradually breaking down, sending sediments into the ocean. Those sediments would provide nutrients that help marine life thrive. In any case, it really feels like a whole different planet. The landscape around you looks like something out of Mars, if it had water. The only question is, where is all the life? Underwater, of course. There's a reason why Devonian is called the Age of Fishes. Now, to be fair, it wasn't all fish. The conditions were perfect for certain early marine life to develop important things, like lungs. Some even gained the ability to crawl out of the water and onto land for short periods. So, if you spot a tiny lizard-like creature around the coast, don't step on it. It's your great-great-great-great-great-grandparent. Well, it's not like you'd be able to really step on it. Remember the guy from the evolution meme with a funny crocodile-like head? His name is Tiktaalik. As you can guess, it was one of the first creatures linking fish to land. And although it might look friendly, it actually has a 9-foot-long body and very sharp teeth. And yes, it can crawl. So if you notice a huge lizard, better find a hiding spot. You'll start seeing more of those Tiktaaliks and four-legged animals in general by the Middle Devonian. But let's risk our lives for a moment and dive underwater. What do we have here? Welcome to Subnautica, Earth Virgin. While the land looks very primitive, marine life is incredibly diverse. We have corals, sponge-like creatures, sea lilies, shellfish that resemble clams, and more. The oceans are filled with various critters that look fascinating and potentially dangerous. Here are some tough armored placoderms, and yes, all of them are bigger than you. These formidable fish had powerful jaws with blade-like plates as teeth. They started as tiny guys who munched on mollusks, but as time went on, some turned into massive fish-slicing monsters, reaching up to 33 feet in length. The biggest of them was Heterosteus with their scary-looking eyes. This other guy, whose name Titanichthys, with its mouth always ready to swallow you. And the largest one, Dunkleosteus. Oh, those are $5 names, huh? And here are some smaller guys. These are the shark ancestors, the cartilaginous fish. They had small, rough scales, fixed fins, and sharp, replaceable teeth. And finally, there are tiny ancestors of our normal modern sea creatures, bony fish. They're nice and pretty harmless. They were covered in scales and equipped with maneuverable fins. You know what? I think you can cook this one. So the question is, how do you cook it? There are no trees for fuel around, not until the Middle Devonian at least. So you'd have to scrounge up some super dry moss and get to work rubbing rocks together. Fortunately, the warmth of the climate would save you from freezing at night. But since there's not much stuff to burn, you might be better off sticking to a raw diet of mollusks and other early arthropods. In this world of basic plant life on land and a huge ocean around, getting food and resources would be quite tough for you. Perhaps you could stick to fishing or collecting stuff from the sea. Overall, you'd have to be really clever to live off the small amount of plant life and maybe learn a thing or two from the sea creatures about navigating the oceans. In any case, you'd have to start from scratch. Surviving in the Devonian would be quite a challenge. Our bodies aren't built for living underwater or thriving in an environment dominated by early marine life. You need some shelter. Maybe you could try to build a basic house along the shores using dirt and moss, probably. You just need to create tools and shelters using whatever resources you can find. So, get creative. Also, get used to living without clothes, unless you make up a way to create a dress out of moss, seashells, and fish bones, all Little Mermaid style. Alright, to make it more fair for you, let's say you ended up closer to the late Devonian period. Hey, now things are looking up. At the end of that era, the first forest started covering our Earth. Now we had plants with spores, leaves and roots, and even the first plants with seeds. The land is slowly getting some life. Hooray to normal breathing again! We've got some little bugs, 4- and 6-legged critters. The first land vertebrates, early tetrapods, started showing up. They're pretty cool. Very early ancestors of mammals and eventually us humans. But hold on, Houston, we've got a problem. As plants started taking over the land and breaking the rocks with roots, they released tons of nutrients in the water and caused a chain reaction. The sea got filled with algae, greedy bacteria thrived, and since there was almost no oxygen in the waters, around 70 to 80% of the species vanished. Whoops. But hey, good news for you! Less oxygen-hungry predators in the water. However, now you have to watch out for your new land neighbors. Most of them aren't harmful, but it's better to watch out. But still, with more trees and plants around, you could make useful tools like spears, fishing hooks, and rope. During the end of the Devonian, you might even build yourself a tree house. Picture that, in a world with the first tree ever, reaching 90 feet tall with a super wide trunk. So, it seems like you'd be able to survive without much trouble. You might even turn into a vegetarian with all these plant options. And hey, no more itchy clothes. You could fashion something much more comfortable. And remember that dinosaurs are on their way. Until then, enjoy your time. They ruled the planet for over 170 million years and then disappeared. History says it was a huge city-sized asteroid that came from space and hit the land of the Yucatan Peninsula around 66 million years ago. It caused terrible environmental changes, debris in the air blocking the sunlight so the plants couldn't survive. temperatures on Earth's surface plunged. The animals were struggling to survive until they finally went extinct. At least, that's something many paleontologists believe happened. Now, they found out dinosaurs were about to go extinct even before the asteroid. Their diversity started to go down 10 million years before the asteroid. Older, long-living species didn't evolve enough to adapt to all changes in the environment, such as higher sea levels, massive volcanic activity, cooler periods. Dinosaurs preferred a warm climate because it helped them to keep a stable body temperature. Dinosaurs lived on all 7 continents, even in Antarctica. That's because it wasn't all ice back then. Around 90 million years ago, Antarctica was a swampy rainforest with a warm, pleasant climate. It was even in a different location, only 560 miles from the then South Pole. That was the time of the warmest climate on our planet. The sea level was 560 feet higher than today, and the tropical sea surface could reach temperatures up to 95 degrees. Antarctica still had something like polar night, months without sunlight, but the climate around the South Pole was mild and temperate, with no ice masses. Dinosaurs didn't shed their skin in one long piece like today's reptiles do. Scientists believe they shed it in small pieces, had something like dinosaur fur. There was a dinosaur, Pagomastax, that looked like a cross between a porcupine and a parrot. It had 1-inch long jaws and ate plants. It had a short beak and self-sharpening long teeth. They were like scissors this small dinosaur used to slice up plants. Our modern lion has a mighty bite, but a big and scary T-Rex bites more than 2 times stronger. The king of the dinosaurs has the strongest bite amongst all land animals, 3.5 times stronger than today's record holder, the Australian saltwater crocodile. It also had the longest teeth, almost 10 inches long, the length of an iPad. Most modern animals are either warm-blooded or cold-blooded. Dinosaurs were somewhere in between. Scientists think they mainly were mesotherms, which means the activity of their muscles could warm their bodies, but their body temperature could fluctuate too. Many dinosaurs, such as Triceratops and Stegosaurus, had spikes, plates, horns, crests, or other bizarre structures on their bodies. In the beginning, scientists thought that's for things like defense. They had neither sharp teeth nor hooked claws on the toes to hunt. But soon, they expanded the theory. It was probably a way to impress their mates and identify members of their kind. One species, namely Pachycephalosaurus, even had a funky bone hat on top of its head. Scary, tall as buildings, massive. That's what we saw in the movies, but dinosaurs mainly were human-sized or even smaller. Bigger bones were easy to be fossilized, so that's why we mostly find gigantic species. Eoraptor, or dawn stealer, was the first named dinosaur. Small and toothy, like me, it got its name because it comes from the dawn of the dinosaur age, the size of a German shepherd, but probably not that friendly. Arched back, sharp bony plates, curved tail. Ankylosaurus were some sort of giant, much-spikier dinosaur version of an armadillo. Its weak spot was a soft underbelly, but meat-eating dinos that were after this one had to flip that guy first to get there. Still, it was really tough because of their impressive gear. Scientists believe they even had bony eyelids. Some dinos ate meat, others plants, and some of them could nibble even on pebbles. One dinosaur, called Gallimimus, couldn't physically chew all those plants it ate, so it would ingest pebbles to mash up the food. Gallimimus looked like some weird alien mix of dinosaur and bird. But it couldn't dribble a basketball because its wrists weren't capable of keeping the palms parallel to the floor. And they had no three-point shot. The largest dinos were plant eaters. Meat eaters, or so-called theropods, were mostly smaller. One reason is that plant-eating dinosaurs were very greedy. They would devour enormous amounts of food, sometimes even swallowing the entire branches without chewing. Some of the biggest could eat a ton of food every day, like a bus-sized pile. There were also more plant-eating dinosaurs than the other ones. Scientists are still not sure if meat-eating dinosaurs were able to coordinate themselves in hunting groups. They were probably unfriendly towards each other, especially when it comes to sharing prey. Fossils, and the shape of delicate bones in the eye, tell dinosaurs mostly roamed around during the day. Scientists think only smaller meat-eating dinos, like Velociraptor, were active during the night. They were after those small mammals snuffling around and trying to find food while big dinosaurs were asleep, or that's what they thought. Those small mammals were usually burrowing animals that survived both dinosaur reign and ice age hiding underground. Not all mammals were hiding from dinosaurs. Some small but sneaky creatures, like Reptinomammus, would steal the eggs from big dinosaurs, which was a big thing considering they had to trick the mama dinosaur first. Researchers believe dinos tried to flap on the ground to get faster at running up inclined terrains to catch their prey. Such behavior caused them to learn how to fly, which of course happened through thousands of years. Dinosaurs were fuzzy and fluffy. They are related to birds, but even those early dino species that didn't fly had feathers, like gigantic, scary, fuzzy T-Rex. Movies lied. You just can't stand still and expect a T-Rex would pass you by. Its vision was probably better than one today's raptors have. Even without it, they still had a pretty good sense of smell. Running could help it though. Scientists calculate T-Rex could probably run at 12 miles per hour. It would shatter its bones at a greater speed. Some dinos had tails more than 45 feet long. Tails helped them to keep their balance when running, especially those that walked on two legs. Velociraptors were not like raptors we see on the screen, but more like some sort of prehistoric chickens. Small, a little bit bigger than a turkey, 2 feet in height, probably had feathers, hollow bones just like birds, mostly loners. But they were probably among the smartest dinos. Their brain was big compared to their bodies. They were as intelligent as today's ostriches. The name Velociraptor means speedy thief. Stegosaurus had a pretty big body, spiky plates, and a tiny brain, the size of a walnut or lime. But at least it had its own air conditioner. Researchers found out its spikes were filled with veins that transferred blood and developed a theory that they were cooling its giant body that way. Diprotodon was the flying reptile with a wingspan of 8 feet and multi-purpose teeth. Teeth in the upper jaw were longer, sharper, and better for catching food from the water. The teeth in the bottom jaw were better for holding the game in transit. One of the first potential dinosaur discoveries was in China 3,500 years ago. No one knew about dinosaurs then, so people thought teeth they found could belong to dragons. The Hadrosaurus was a duck-billed dino with more than 1,000 teeth. When they would fall off, it could grow new ones indefinitely. Dinosaurs' eggs were pretty big, some as big as beach balls. Now that's an omelet. The Baryonyx was a big fan of fish. Its name means a heavy claw, and it got it because of big extended claws that were pretty sharp and made up the thumb of each hand. When catching fish, they used the claws like spears. Mosasaurus, also popular in movies, was not quite the dinosaur but a marine lizard, closely related to monitor lizards and snakes. Like a snake, it had jaws that could expand when swallowing the food. These creatures were speedy. They had a tail fin and flipper-like paddles instead of arms and legs. Researchers believe they had a weak sense of smell and poor perception of depth, so they had to develop a unique hunting technique, waiting for their snack to come up to the surface for some air. Now, thanks to new fossil discoveries and technologies, we're getting to learn more and more about the biology of dinosaurs. Some people don't need to know more than the fact that a few of them were colossal, terrifying, and vicious. But for those of us that do, the use of comparative biology, pigment analysis, and powerful new X-rays have allowed us to gain insight into specific features, such as their colors, eating behaviors, and the shapes of their tongues. Yes, that's right, the shapes of their tongues, which, for a long period of time, was something of a mystery. This is because soft, fleshy dinosaur parts are hardly ever retained in fossil form. But thanks to the discovery of some surviving hyoid bones, which are situated at the root of the tongue in front of the neck, we now have some insight. Most animals have this hyoid bone that anchors the tongue. The shape and complexity of the bone determine how free-moving the tongue can be. Scientists have discovered that nearly all dinosaurs had simple tongues that laid flat and were extremely similar to the tongues found inside the mouth of a crocodile today. Yeah, this crocodile. Go ahead and take a closer look. Nah, just kidding. Come on back. Let's take a look at some specific dinosaurs and start with the Brachiosaurus. Let me stick my neck out on the line by guessing that most of you will be familiar with this dinosaur because of its neck. You know, the one which was typically 30 feet in length. Despite its neck being its most distinctive feature, its name actually translates to arm lizard in Greek. It's common knowledge that the Brachiosaurus is one of the largest dinosaurs to ever have lived. On average, it reached 76 feet in length and 40 feet in height. That's roughly the length of 2 school buses and as high as a 4-story building. None of which were around in the era of the big guy here. Fragmentary leg bones and vertebra of even larger dinosaur species are known, but these skeletal remains are too incomplete to determine their exact size. So this guy may have been the largest dinosaur ever. A renowned herbivore, thank goodness. The Brachiosaurus is thought to have eaten up to 880 pounds of dry plant matter every day. Most of this was made up of coniferous trees, ginkgos, and cycads. This target might have been hard to hit for this dinosaur, as researchers have learned that its teeth were spoon-shaped and not ideal for chewing food. This means that the creature would have swallowed vegetation whole, as its teeth were suited to stripping it but not breaking up large chunks of plants. This, along with the dinosaur's body shape, suggests that the Brachiosaurus would have liked to feed as quickly as possible. Dinos like these didn't always make use of their ability to strip towering trees when dining. The Brachiosaurus traveled in herds, moving to the next location once they had exhausted all of the local vegetation. And I mean all of the local vegetation, not just that which hung high on trees. It's likely that the creatures supplemented their diets with vegetation at lower levels, especially after they'd done a number on all the nearby trees. This method of feasting was the most energetically appealing for this giant. By munching on lower vegetation, researchers believe that the dinosaurs saved up to 80% in energy compared to when foraging for high-up food sources. They have also discovered that the nostrils of a Brachiosaurus were on the front of its face and not the top. This is because we now know they roamed the fertile floodplains in their respective herds. For decades, it was believed that these creatures lived in deep, watery swamps. Let's look at another common misconception about a popular dinosaur. Please put your hands together for the Tyrannosaurus rex, which is arguably the most famous of all dinosaurs. Discoveries from the past 100 years have revealed that theropods had heavily feathered skin. Theropods are the family of dinosaurs to which the T-Rex belongs, so naturally, people began to think that the creature would have been covered in feathers as well. However, a study from 2017 took skin impressions from the iconic dinosaur and found no evidence of the structures required to support feathers. If a T-Rex did have feathers, they would have been limited to its back. Researchers accept that other large dinosaurs of the same family as the T-Rex have been discovered with their remains covered in feathers. An example of this would be the Yutyrannus dinosaur. But as of now, the accepted theory is that feathers weren't a common feature of T-Rexes. This makes it easier to believe that feathers were exclusive to smaller tyrannosaurids and were there as a means of keeping the creature warm. For a long period of time, researchers thought feathers were an exclusive feature of the theropod family. But this theory has been debunked. Just like the kid at camp who was kicked out of the top bunk. You know, debunked. Anyway, fossil evidence discovered in Siberia now suggests that multiple different family groups of dinosaurs had feathers. The Siberian fossils in question belong to another species of dinosaur, Calindrodromeus zebicolicus. Oh, you think I mispronounced that? Okay, prove it. Now, this dinosaur, I'll call her Calinda, had a pelvis structure superficially similar to that of a bird and was roughly 4.5 feet long, about as tall as a fridge. Since the purpose of feathers on dinosaurs was for warmth, it's quite possible that dinosaurs from cold weather climates had more feathers than their counterparts in warm weather climates. In general, bigger animals struggle less with keeping themselves cool, so it's likely that any of the large dinosaurs who lived in these warm climates had no feathers at all. Smaller dinosaurs who lived in cold climates, on the contrary, had plenty of feathers. We now even understand what some of the designs and patterns of these feathers on dinosaurs looked like, thanks to the discovery of an ornithomimus, complete with feather and skin impressions. The name of this dinosaur is derived from Greek and actually translates to bird mimic. They were typically 11.5 feet in length, nearly as tall as a giraffe, and despite being omnivorous, had no teeth. Its other distinctive features included 3 fingers, which were all unusually the same size and length, and despite their thin-boned skulls, they also had large brain cavities. Their legs were extremely long, in particular their foot bones. Combine this with their toothless beaks and long necks, and yep, it must have looked a lot like an ostrich. Although they're not as big as the Brachiosaurus or dinosaurs in general, they are bigger than any other bird in the world. And it wasn't just the body limbs of an ornithomimus that made it resemble an ostrich. They also had very similar feather patterns. Their heads, necks, and lower legs were mostly bare of feathers, but the rest of their bodies were well coated in downy plumage. This is what you call a bird's layer of feathers as a whole. It's possible, like an ostrich, that the dinosaur would have used this unusual feather pattern to regulate its body temperature. Despite some dinosaurs possessing feathers like birds, on top of also being their distant relatives, dinosaurs didn't have the type of feathers required to fly for most of their existence. Feathers found in fossil impressions or preserved in amber have allowed researchers to gain insight into why these creatures weren't very aerodynamic. The structure of these feathers appears to be very simple, with a poorly defined and flexible central shaft. These feathers would have better served any dinosaur as a fashion statement, as they would have helped attract the attention of other dinosaurs. These feathers also would have had the ability to regulate body temperature. Surprised to hear that dinosaurs had ostrich-like feathers? Wait till I tell you that their prehistoric distant reptile cousins had something that looked like fur. Allow me to introduce you to the pterosaur. Its name is derived from Greek and translates to winged lizard. Just like dinosaurs, they were initially thought to have scaly or leathery skin all over their bodies. But over the course of the 20th century, fossil examinations revealed that many parts of a pterosaur's body were furry. The wingspan of a pterosaur could reach the length of over 23 feet, about as long as a London bus. Its toothless jaw was very long and resembled that of a pelican. How could something that looks like a pelican be so terrifying? These creatures were coated in pycnofibers. Those were simple structures, feather-like in composition, but strand-like and fuzzy like fur. Further research suggests that some parts of the pterosaur's body had more complex kinds of feathers with branching strands. If this is accurate, it would be the first time feathers were found on an animal that was neither a dinosaur nor a bird.
You call your beloved cat to have his dinner, Sir Scratchy. Suddenly, you hear loud stomping. The dishes on the dinner table clink with every thump. A painting's fallen off the wall. Is it an earthquake? No, that's a cat the size of a pony walking into the dining room. It needs 10 times as much food as the average cat. And it purrs like a tractor. No, Scratchy, stop rolling! You'll turn over the cupboard! Well, this is one possible scenario for the evolution of animals in the future. Climate, water, oxygen in the air, and even gravity are factors that influence the course of evolution. For example, scientists predict that some bird species will gradually lose their warm feathers. In the future, they will basically look like sphinx cats with beaks and wings. The same thing might happen to our pets. Gradually, their fur will become shorter until they're completely bald. Urban pests like pigeons and rats will become even bigger, the size of a cat. A few million years ago, rats were barely the size of your little finger. That's because they hid in small burrows and had to be nearly invisible to large predators. Now, they live in comfortable cellars that humans have built. They can create cozy nests there. and the large amount of food in trash cans keeps them from starving. So they feel quite comfortable and continue to grow in size. Even more, rats have already developed oily fur so that dirty or toxic water can run off them without harming the rodents themselves. Plant-eating mammals, on the other hand, might have it worse. Their food will gradually diminish. With time, there will be fewer forests and greenery on the planet, and some plants will disappear altogether. Eventually, animals like deer, elephants, giraffes, and others will get smaller and smaller because of the lack of food. In addition to shrinking, mammals will have smaller eyes so they don't lose water from their bodies, and their ears will become larger to lose heat through them. Their tails will grow longer to swat away insects. As land mammals become smaller, birds will increase in size. That's because they'll be able to include shrinking animals in their diet, and the muscles of birds will become much stronger because they'll have to fly long distances in search of food. Animals in hot and dry places are more likely to learn how to get water from the air. To do so, they'll need long sails or skin flaps. Early in the morning, when the air is coolest, moisture will accumulate on these new body parts, and some lizards will evolve their collars to a much larger size. Then they'll be able to collect more rainwater. As for the marine world, we can already see some fish jumping out of the water to catch insects. In the course of evolution, fish fins may become longer and stronger so that they can leap further. And gradually, those fins will turn into wings to make them truly flying fish. Perhaps in the future, these fish will hunt small birds. To do that, they'll learn to hold their breath for longer and fly much higher. But the big fish and marine mammals will have a hard time. The ocean will heat up, and some species will begin to disappear. The largest inhabitant of the aquatic world, the blue whale, which is the size of 2 school buses, will shrink in size because there will be less food for it in the ocean. But the population of lizards and reptiles will thrive. They're good at absorbing heat. And with climate change, there will be more insects on our planet, which means more food for lizards. They'll start to increase in size. But now, they'll have to defend themselves against big birds. Their legs will become longer and stronger, so they'll be able to run a lot faster and not get eaten by a bird. And the insects? Well, they'll just explode. Insects will probably live in huge swarms and fly around looking for food. And they'll be angry and hungry because their usual source of food, mammals, will have either ceased to exist or shrunk in size. Humans will change too. Scientists predict that between 1,000 and 1 million years from now, we will completely lose our hair. Our limbs will become thinner and longer, and will be about 7 feet tall. Our feet will most likely lose their toes because they're no longer needed to keep our balance. Our head and brain will become more like a balloon, and our lifespan will be more than 100 years. Because humans are at the top of the food chain and don't take part in natural selection, we'll gradually become similar to each other. In tens of millions of years, all humans will probably look the same. Plus, we're developing genetic engineering technology. Luminous rabbits, incredibly sized cows, web-weaving goats, super muscular pigs, and more. But we're more interested in how animals will evolve on their own. So, fast forward ahead in time. Humans have long lived on other planets and in other galaxies. Earth has long since become home to animals and plants. The only traces of humans here are giant cities made of metal and concrete that are buried deep underground. And up there, incredible creatures like the Naracoorte live. It's something between an ostrich and a vulture, the size of an adult human. Its long and powerful beak is its main tool for protection against predators and for eating. Their strong legs with long claws make them excellent runners. This creature can walk dozens of miles in a day. Naracoorte needs warm fur or feathers. Without humans and the greenhouse effect, the temperature on Earth has dropped. But with a warm jacket, they'll be able to survive even a new ice age. And like ostriches, they reproduce by laying eggs. This is a Paris shrew. It's like a common shrew, a couple of inches long. But it has an unusual feature, a parachute on its tail. While little, they live in their parents' nests, but when they leave them, They launch themselves into the air and then open a parachute made of thin fur. The warm currents of air rise up and carry them. They can spend up to 24 hours in the air. Then they'll nest elsewhere, and their babies will leave their home the same way. The waka. Waka waka. This animal looks like a striped giraffe with only 2 legs. It'll be one of the fastest creatures on our planet. No predator can beat it in a race. Plus, their eyes are perched high on their head, and with its long neck, the waka can see a threat even when sitting in tall grass. Terabytes are descendants of termites that will appear on Earth in 200 million years. If they see a threat, they'll spew a stream of chemicals, something like acid, from their huge head. Even the biggest predators will be afraid to approach them. Reed stilts are about 3.5 feet tall and weigh almost as much as an adult human. Thanks to its striped coloring, a reed stilt is almost invisible in the reeds. It walks on its thin legs through marshy terrain and feeds on small fish. Its long neck and sharp teeth allow it to dash into the water, almost cobra-like. It catches fish and swallows them almost whole. But all of these predictions are very speculative. There are billions of factors that influence the course of evolution. The course of evolution could go the other way at any time. For example, an asteroid hits the Earth, causing a mass extinction and changing our planet's climate. A small percentage of surviving organisms begin to adapt to the new conditions. In a few million years, we'll have animals that none of us could have even imagined.
The problem with that asteroid that destroyed dinosaurs was not that it fell, but where it fell. This colossal space rock found the worst place where it could land. Also, the angle at which it hit the ground was the most unfortunate. If it had fallen vertically, there would have been less destruction. But it fell at such an angle that it threw a huge amount of dust into the air. After the disaster occurred, tons of soot started burning. 65 million years ago, only 13% of Earth's surface contained the right amount of sulfur and oil needed to form a colossal amount of soot. If the asteroid had fallen on the other 87% of the territory, dinosaurs could still be living today, but it hit the worst place and lifted 1 million tons of burning material into the sky. A cloud of incandescent particles covered the sky and set off on a journey across the mainland. Then, these particles settled on the ground and caused large-scale fires. Trees were burning and sending more soot into the sky. But the asteroid collided not only with rocks, it fell on the coast in a place where the seabed was filled with sulfate. As a result of the collision, it started burning, which caused the release of sulfuric acid into the atmosphere. The air became poisoned. It seems the dinosaurs didn't stand a chance. And now, let's imagine the asteroid falling in another place, somewhere in the middle of the ocean. Huge waves flooded part of the land, but almost all kinds of dinosaurs survived. Or even better, the rock could have fallen somewhere in the desert and left behind a giant crater. That's all. Yes, several dinosaurs passing by wouldn't have survived the collision, but the situation wouldn't have been so critical in general. So, giant lizards remain dominant on our planet. They don't allow other animals to develop since Tyrannosaurus and other ferocious reptiles hunt mammoths and other ancient creatures. The population of mammals is decreasing. Velociraptors are fighting for territories with saber-toothed tigers and giant bears. A struggle for survival between dinosaurs and other animals begins. Then, the Ice Age comes, and some reptiles don't survive. Then, new players enter the field. Those are humans' early ancestors. Living side by side with dinosaurs is difficult. Lizards attack settlements and caves, so people have to build high walls for protection. By the way, the Tyrannosaurus poses less danger to people than you might have thought. According to the latest research, many creatures were able to run away from this monster. Yes, you probably saw how easily they caught up with cars in the movies, but it wouldn't be as scary in reality. Paleontologists and biologists have analyzed the strength of dinos' bones and found out that the creature couldn't reach high speeds. The maximum it was capable of was running twice as slow as a field athlete. Thousands of years have passed. People have learned to live with dinosaurs. They've even managed to tame some lizards. They've domesticated herbivorous dinosaurs to develop agriculture. Triceratopses and bulls now plow fields together. Imagine farms swarming with Diplodocus or Brachiosauruses. People climb their long necks and pick fruit from high trees. Stegosauruses protect pastures from wolves and velociraptors. Dinosaurs with shells, such as Ankylosauruses, help people cross deserts. They, along with camels and donkeys, carry heavy loads. People share the planet with ancient lizards and live in harmony. The situation in the seas and oceans is much worse. Sea reptiles attack wooden ships and catch all the fish. Imagine that you're sailing to another continent with tons of grain, fabrics, fur, and other goods. And then a giant mosasaur appears on the horizon. It's one of the most powerful sea lizards. A great white shark looks like a small fish next to it. The creature could easily defeat a megalodon. And then it comes across a wooden ship. It bites into the deck and pulls the whole boat underwater. Water dinosaurs are the main obstacle to communication between countries. This slows the progress down for 100 years. People built metal ships to withstand the attacks of the mosasaur. And finally, they managed to establish sea connections. A similar problem occurs when the first planes take off into the sky. Imagine you're flying on a passenger Boeing. You look out of the window and see a pterodactyl. Wait, it's impossible. These winged lizards aren't so fast, but they can catch up with a helicopter or some old biplanes. This poses a serious threat to flights, so people install sound protection systems on board each aircraft. Pterodactyls hear irritating ultrasound from a distance and fly as far away from it as possible. People equip submarines and ships with the same sound shields. Then, after people have learned how to defend themselves from dinosaurs, another problem appears. Lizards are the kings of wildlife, so they displace all other animal species. Dinosaurs run across African savannas, and lizards with fur live in cold winter forests. Lions, wolves, and bears are not the rulers of the wild. Rhinos fight with Parasaurolophuses. Stegosauruses attack hippos and take away their territories. Venomous dinosaurs live in jungles. Lizards that can climb trees scare monkeys. Imagine a reptilian ape jumping from one branch to another. To save regular animals from extinction, people have to control the population of predatory reptiles. Huge parks and nature reserves appear in all countries. People transport dinosaurs there and separate them from other wildlife. Dinosaurs seem to be completely under control. When the danger caused by giant reptiles passes, people begin to breed smaller, harmless lizards. Someone buys a chameleon, and someone keeps a Microceratus at home. There are dinosaur exhibitions. People take these creatures for a walk as if they were dogs. Some people take selfies with reptiles, go shopping, and sit in cafes with small lizards. Dinosaurs aren't formidable now. They're kinda cute. People ride horses, camels, Parasaurolophuses, and Pachycephalosauruses. Of course, many have tried to tame velociraptors, but failed. Those are dangerous reptiles and they don't know how to obey. Taming them is almost as difficult as taming an alligator. But dogs and cats are still more popular because they're more intelligent. The brain of a dinosaur is almost the same as that of a chicken. But who knows, if they had lived to this day, perhaps they would have evolved into smarter creatures. Just imagine if dinos were intelligent. In this case, people would have a big problem. Some scientists think that even if a meteorite hadn't destroyed the dinosaurs, they wouldn't have survived to this day. They needed to carry their own colossal weight at all times. It was an enormous load on their bones and joints. Most dinosaurs wouldn't have been able to survive the Ice Age with such characteristics, but smaller lizards might have succeeded. Fast and agile dinosaurs, such as velociraptors and Pachycephalosauruses, would have survived, but in what form? Could dinosaurs have already evolved into something else? Look at the good old chicken. Many scientists believe it's a direct descendant of the formidable Tyrannosaurus. Somewhere deep inside the bird's DNA, there are genes that the dinosaur had. Yep, it's hard to believe, but look at the chicken's body structure and how it walks. Remove the plumage, cover the creature with scales, and give it toothy jaws instead of a beak. And now, you have a mini T-Rex in the coop. And by the way, not only chickens might be the relatives of giant lizards, many birds are dinosaurs' living descendants. Surprisingly, alligators, snakes, crocodiles, and monitor lizards are not as close to ancient reptiles as pelicans, storks, and other flying creatures. Over millions of years of evolution, the paws of dinosaurs turned into wings, and toothy elongated jaws ended up as beaks. The genetics of birds is the key to understanding dinosaurs. Pelicans are similar to pterodactyls, ostriches to velociraptors. Perhaps many other animals also share some genes with ancient lizards. If the meteorite hadn't fallen, all dinosaurs would have evolved into completely different, unusual creatures. Scientists want to carefully study the DNA of birds and try to reverse evolution with the help of genetic engineering. They hope to breed dinosaurs out of eggs one day. But to do this, they need to find a specific genome that hasn't changed over tens of millions of years. It hides in the DNA. And it's not so easy to find it and extract it. Do you think we will see powerful reptiles by 2050?
And here you are, on Earth, 66 million years ago. It's one of the warmest periods in the planet's history. There are no ice caps yet. Everything is lush and green. Dinosaurs roam the Earth. Massive sauropods peacefully chew on flowering plants and trees, their young ones following closely by their side. Ah! You strain your neck to see their heads 5 stories above you. But that's when you see something else. A bright spot in the sky. A shooting star. Make a wish. Wait a minute. The star grows bigger, brighter. Little do the mass reptiles know, today marks the beginning of one of the largest mass extinction events in Earth's history. 3/4 of life on our planet will be wiped out. Hey, we'll just hide over here and watch. 5 seconds before impact. The meteorite rips a hole through our atmosphere like a needle in a balloon. The resulting supersonic shock wave starts to ripple around the globe. You'd hear it on the opposite side of the planet. The cosmic monster falling toward the Earth is the size of Mount Everest, at least 6 miles wide and weighing 460 trillion tons. The meteor is coming in hot and fast, 12 miles per second, heading right for the Yucatan Peninsula in present-day Mexico. At that speed, it could travel from LA to New York in under 4 minutes. Impact. The mountain-sized asteroid smashes into the Earth. If only it had been anywhere else, life on this planet might look a lot different today. The Yucatan Peninsula, almost entirely underwater then, was one of just 8 places on the entire globe that would have let a giant space rock wipe out nearly all life on the planet, meaning the asteroid only had a 13% chance of causing a mass extinction, and it happened to hit just the right spot. Well, aren't we lucky? At the point of impact, there's an explosion 1 billion times more powerful than even the most massive volcanic eruption. It looks like a new sun has appeared on our planet's surface. The meteorite digs into the Earth's crust and explodes into 1 million pieces. You can still see the scar it left. The Chicxulub crater is 93 miles wide and 12 miles deep. It could fit the entire state of Vermont and 24 Burj Khalifas stacked on top of each other. Something that leaves a scar like that has global consequences. The Earth ripples. The shock wave spreads for thousands of miles. The air blasts flatten forests in a second. Everything within striking radius is set ablaze. Nothing survives ground zero. But that was just the beginning. Smaller fragments of the meteorite, as well as parts of the Earth displaced by the giant hole it dug, go ricocheting out, reaching as far as Canada. The sky lights up with fireballs. They smash into the surface as well. Dinosaurs that weren't in the blast radius run in panic, but they have nowhere to hide. It's only about to get worse. The shock waves race across the sea. The tsunami is nearly a mile high when it hits the coast. The waves keep traveling, reaching the furthest corners of the planet. Even across the Pacific and up into the North Atlantic, they're 5 stories high. They wash away everything in their path. Besides the raging fires and skyscraper-sized tsunamis, the Earth is shaking from the worst earthquakes in history. A planet lush and teeming with life only a few minutes ago has turned into a nightmarish place. But this was only Phase 1. 5 minutes after impact. Small rocks, dust, and ash rise high up into the atmosphere. These objects heat up and melt. They turn into hot lava that begins to fall to the ground like burning rain. 10 hours after impact. Fires continue to engulf everything in their path. Some surviving dinosaurs in North America try to escape to unknown territories, but now they're in dense swamps and can't escape. 1 month after impact. 15 trillion tons, 2.5 million times the weight of the Great Pyramid of Giza. That much ash and soot are released into the atmosphere. The cloud covers the entire planet and blocks out the sun. The Earth sinks into darkness. Surviving plants can't photosynthesize. Oxygen levels drop. Any animals left at this point are finally done in from lack of air. But the worst consequence was the extinction of phytoplankton. The entire oceanic food chain starts to collapse like a house of cards. Many marine animals have lost their main source of food. Surviving animals on land also can't find anything to eat. There are no plants for the herbivores, and soon no herbivores left for the meat-eaters. And still, there's the acid rain. The Chicxulub meteorite hit a place where there was a lot of sulfur. The heat of the impact vaporizes the toxic gas instantly. It mixes with the air in the atmosphere. Acid rains fall all over the planet. The oceans become toxic. And if all that doesn't get them, the cold finally finishes off the job. With the sun blocked out, the burning fireball that is our planet starts to cool down. What's left in the wake? Plants are a little luckier than animals. Seeds and pollen are able to survive these harsh times. The first to slowly paint the charcoal planet green are ferns. The wind carries their seeds, sprinkling them across the earth over 10 years. Then come the palms. The new planets produce oxygen and feed small mammals. Of the reptiles, only turtles and ancient ancestors of crocodiles can survive the temperature and acidity of the planet's waters. Unbelievably, some bird-like dinosaurs survive too. Other species of birds evolve and survive to this day. Sadly though, all terrestrial animals over 50 pounds in weight went extinct. It took much longer for the animal kingdom to recover. Larger mammals, such as rhinos, began to appear only 15 million years after the dinosaurs disappeared. Blue whales, the largest living creature this planet has ever seen, bigger than any of the dinos, only showed up a little over 4 million years ago. Did the dinos have a fighting chance? Scientists say that if the meteorite had hit in the deeper ocean, the story would have gone a lot differently. Yes, the resulting tidal waves would have been 10 times higher than the already massive ones that rippled across the planet. But even a giant mega tsunami wouldn't be able to wipe out 75% of plant and animal life on Earth. What really did the dinosaurs in was the global blackout. If the meteorite had hit in deeper water, not the shallow sea of the Gulf of Mexico, there wouldn't have been so much dust and ash in the atmosphere. That dropped the oxygen levels and cut off the food chain from the very bottom. There's a theory that climate change and other conditions on Earth 66 million years ago would have still wiped out the dinosaurs, no meteorite necessary. It could be a supervolcano erupting and spewing out large amounts of sulfur and ash into the atmosphere. Perhaps the meteorite just sped up the inevitable. Now let's move on to a more interesting question. Could humanity survive a meteorite impact like that? Back then, not a chance, obviously. But if something like that were to happen in our time, we have an advanced intellect and technology. We've filled the cosmos with probes and satellites, so we know about any possible meteors headed straight our way. It wouldn't take us by surprise. Now, we might have to hide deep underground to avoid the blast wave and tsunamis. And you'd need enough food down there to last for at least a year. And don't forget your toilet paper. But with the right prep, humanity could stand a chance. The main problem after such an event is to survive the global winter when the ash covers the sky. But our species can handle it. Just ask anyone living in Oymyakon, Russia. The town of 500 people holds a Guinness World Record for the coldest inhabited place on Earth. They've seen the thermometer read minus 90 degrees Fahrenheit. What about preserving plant and animal life? Our species has been working on that for a long time. There's a World Seed storage facility on Svalbard Island. It's about 40 stories underground and can hold over 2 billion samples. The location was chosen because of the permafrost climate and low tectonic activity. Preserving all the planet's animals would be a tougher job. Perhaps genetic engineering, cloning, or something else would work. Herding them all down into a bunker? I mean crocs, bears, and snakes included? I think I'd rather try my luck above ground, thank you. 66 million years ago, I wasn't around then, a huge asteroid hit the Earth and triggered the mass extinction of almost all living creatures on the planet, including dinosaurs. Had the space object crashed somewhere else, some dinosaurs would have been able to survive and still live nowadays. According to some research, the asteroid had about 1 in 10 chances of wiping out the dinosaurs and other animals of that time. It was way more likely to just hit the ground without any strong destructive consequences. To understand how things could have turned out if the place of the collision had occurred elsewhere, we need to find out what happened that day and why the disaster turned out to be so devastating. This huge space rock fell into the coastal area of the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. This caused a chain reaction that triggered natural disasters around the world. The place the asteroid hit is called Chicxulub Crater. Now half of this area is underwater. The asteroid was about 7.5 miles in diameter and moving at a speed of 27,000 miles per hour. This rock, bigger than Everest, was rushing toward Earth faster than the speed of sound by almost 40 times. Wow. The energy released in the collision was as powerful as an explosion of about 10 billion atomic bombs, and the destructive force of the blast wave was just one of several disasters. The asteroid happened to fall in one of the worst possible places, and because of the way it fell, it threw a huge amount of dust into the air. Imagine you're jumping into the water like a professional athlete vertically, leaving hardly any splashes behind. And now think of how much water splashes when you jump into the pool like a cannonball. So the asteroid landed the cannonball way. The second disaster the asteroid provoked was soot burning. A small part of the Earth's surface consists of rocks. Only a tiny percentage of that part was rich in oil and sulfur back then. The asteroid burned and lifted so much soot into the air that it would be enough to fill an indoor baseball stadium. According to research, 65 million years ago, only 13% of the surface of the entire planet could have contained the necessary amount of organic material for the formation of such a volume of soot. That's why this place was considered the worst. If the catastrophe had happened on the territory of the other 87%, then dinosaurs would have been alive today. A huge cloud of soot and carbon dioxide rose into the air and covered the sun. The soot turned the sky gray and partially blocked sunlight. This led to a quick drop in temperatures almost all over the planet. It seemed like Earth was inside a gray veil. Many plants and animals couldn't survive the cold snap. Trees began to wither because of the lack of sun. The photosynthesis process was disrupted. The cold and withering of trees led to another catastrophe: global famine. Herbivores couldn't survive because they lost almost all of their food. Plants, flowers, and trees didn't manage to get through the catastrophe. These destructions spread far beyond the asteroid impact site. Hot dust particles, asteroid chunks, and small pieces of rocks settled to the ground across the continent and caused large-scale forest fires. Burning trees threw even more soot into the air, which made the situation even worse. The huge asteroid brought heavy metals with an increased level of toxicity from space. The melting of these substances during the collision provoked firestorms. The asteroid didn't only hit continental land but also water, which triggered a huge tsunami. But that's not the worst part. The seabed was filled with sulfate, and when the energy of the asteroid burned it, it provoked the release of sulfuric acid into the atmosphere. The acid cloud mixed with a cloud of soot and began to spread throughout the sky. Hot rock particles were falling to the ground like fire rain. An acid rain started because of sulfur. It lasted for almost several days and left no chance for the animals to survive. Acid rain made the water in rivers, lakes, and seas poisoned. The acid destroyed anything that couldn't burn. A part of the clouds went to wreck the land, and the other part the ocean. This made the situation even worse, as sulfur droplets wiped out a huge amount of seaweed and phytoplankton. The ocean generates almost half of all oxygen reserves on our planet. Those days, the sea creatures living in its upper parts were destroyed. It wasn't the blast wave, but lack of sun, acid, darkness, and cold that became the main reasons for the extinction of dinosaurs. But even when some lizards escaped from fires and sulfur, they met the sea element. The asteroid impact caused large-scale tsunamis across the planet. The very first wave was around 1 mile in height. That's almost 3 times higher than the Empire State Building. Billions of gallons of water were moving at 90 miles per hour. A wave this strong could easily destroy half of New York today. The meteorite created a series of waves 52 feet high. Massive walls of water the size of 5-story buildings collapsed on the shore and demolished everything in their path. Lack of sunlight, temperature drop, acid and fire rains, reduced oxygen production, forest fires, giant tsunamis, and the explosive wave with the power of 1 billion atomic bombs, all this reduced the biological diversity of Earth by 75%. Yeah, that'll change your climate for sure. Giant asteroids used to hit Earth before, but they never caused such disasters all over the planet. What if this asteroid had fallen into another place, say a forest, far from water and mountainous terrain? This would have caused severe fires. A huge black cloud of ash would have risen into the sky and obscured the sun. But it would have unlikely generated acid or fire rains. Most of the species of the planet could have survived this catastrophe. What if the meteorite had fallen somewhere among the ice and snow? This would have provoked a rapid increase in temperature across the planet. Huge tsunamis would have sunk big tracts of land. However, ash and sulfur dioxide wouldn't have filled the sky. Acid rain wouldn't have hit the ocean. Many marine creatures could have survived and lived to this day. And dinosaurs, far from the oceans, wouldn't have noticed the meteorite fall at all. Probably the most terrible events would have occurred if a meteorite had fallen on an active volcano. This would have triggered the largest lava release in history. Destructive earthquakes would have begun, and the whole sky would have been covered with volcanic ash. What if the meteorite had hit some desert? It would have melted billions of tons of sand and turned it into glass. Just imagine glass dunes that heat our planet even more. And we could dig up the well-preserved remains of ancient lizards out of the glass. Anyway, there were many different possible catastrophic scenarios, and the worst of them came true for the dinosaurs. They are unlikely to return, although perhaps they can be reborn. Scientists were inspired by an idea from a famous Hollywood movie. They wanted to find a mosquito that got stuck in amber. They would extract dinosaur DNA from it. But there was a problem with this. The oldest DNA sample they managed to find was 1 million years old. Dinosaurs were extinct about 66 million years ago. Besides, DNA is a very fragile thing. The probability that it could have been preserved intact somewhere for so long is very small. So, instead of searching for this ancient dinosaur DNA, scientists decided to take DNA from the closest ancestors of these lizards, birds. Over millions of years of evolution, dinosaur paws could have turned into wings, and elongated mouths could have become beaks. Pelicans are very similar to pterodactyls, ostriches resemble velociraptors, and chickens are very much like T-Rex. Okay, let's just stop and imagine for a moment a chicken the size of a T-Rex.
Hey, you want a piece of me?
Now, the common chicken is recognized as the closest relative of the huge lizard. Remove the plumage from it, cover it with scales, give a toothy mouth instead of a beak, and attach a long tail. And you get a real mini Tyrannosaurus rex by body structure and movement. Deep in its DNA, there are similar genes that formidable predators have. With the help of genetic engineering, scientists plan to play with its DNA and try to reverse the evolution, which means breeding dinosaurs can become a reality. Well, that could come back to bite you.
Imagine a planet where every breath you take electrifies your body like a shot of espresso. The sky above you is an intense shade of blue, while colossal trees stretch towards the heavens, their vibrant green leaves growing at an astonishing rate. Daily exercise becomes a thrill like no other. With the abundance of oxygen, you become a supercharged version of yourself. Running feels effortless as you dart across the landscape, lifting weights that would normally seem impossible. It's as if the world itself is infused with a surge of energy. Everything is moving faster. The wildlife surrounding you is equally affected by this oxygen overload. Animals roam the land in majestic proportions. Their massive frames are propelled by speed and agility. Picture yourself in a pulse-pounding chase with an oxygen-charged cheetah, racing against a predator that could put a Ferrari to shame. Now you may wonder how such a wild scenario could ever be possible. Well, let's see. Oxygen is the powerful fuel that keeps life going. It makes up about 21% of the air we breathe, and every breath we take delivers these tiny molecules to our cells, giving them the energy they need to thrive. Without oxygen, our cells would struggle, and our bodies would fall apart. But that's not all. Oxygen is a superstar that works for all kinds of living things, from tiny bacteria to giant elephants. It's even important underwater, where it enriches the oceans. Amazing creatures like plankton and algae produce lots of oxygen, creating a thriving underwater world. But to fully understand the impact of high oxygen levels on the planet, prepare for a journey back in time. Recently, scientists have made an astonishing discovery. They tested rocks from two different places that were really far apart. And can you believe it? These rocks held tiny pockets of gas that showed how oxygen levels shot up by almost a third in a very short time. It was like a breath of fresh air. So they studied these rocks and found that oxygen levels back then were much higher. Imagine lush landscapes, towering forests, and gigantic swamps that stretched as far as you could see. During the Carboniferous period, oxygen ruled the atmosphere at an impressive 20%, just like today. But over the next 50 million years, its levels shot up to a crazy 35%. Can you imagine what that did? As oxygen surged, something incredible happened. Huge forests grew all over the land, creating a breathtaking green world. And massive swamps took over low-lying areas, making the landscape look surreal and otherworldly. At the same time, carbon dioxide levels dropped. Normally, when things break down, microbes release carbon dioxide into the air. This gas acts like a warm blanket, trapping the sun's heat and raising temperatures. But in the mysterious swamps where these giant plants were buried, the microbes couldn't do their job. The result? The planet got really cold. Who would have thought that a breath of fresh air could have such power? The scientists are still trying to figure out why this happened. But one thing is certain, it wasn't just happening in one place. It was a worldwide phenomenon. It was like the planet was playing a funny game with the climate. But let's go even earlier. We see the first North American dinosaurs making their grand entrance. High oxygen levels are what gave a big boost to the rise of mighty dinosaurs in North America and beyond. Picture tropics filled with the magnificent giant creatures. Obviously, dinosaurs didn't just appear out of nowhere. They took advantage of a changing environment that was perfect for their evolution. Oxygen levels played a huge part in this dinosaur party. As oxygen levels rose, so did the size of these incredible creatures. They started small with predators like Chindosaurus, and soon after, huge dinosaurs like sauropods took over the land. Then, 65 million years ago, dinosaurs disappeared and mammals took over. And here's the interesting part. Mammals never grew as big as dinosaurs. So what's the explanation for this? Mammals, and humans are mammals too, by the way, are special because we can regulate our body temperature. But that comes at a cost. We need a lot of energy to stay warm compared to reptiles and dinosaurs. Dinosaurs didn't bother with temperature control, so they could focus on growing big. The biggest dinosaurs were 10 times larger than the largest mammals. It's like a game of anything you can do, I can do 10 times bigger. Dinosaurs might have had similar limitations with their sizes, but those were much less strict. Before the dinosaurs' extinction, mammals were very small. Many mammal species disappeared along with the dinosaurs. But survivors took advantage of the open ecosystem and rapidly diversified into various body sizes. However, after 42 million years of growth, mammals reached a size plateau. This happened on all continents, most likely because of the temperature and land area. Colder environments allowed mammals to grow larger. Balancing body size and heat became challenging. Land area also played a role in sustaining big populations. But making animals bigger isn't the only thing high oxygen can do. This humble gas is a true jack of all trades. It also acts as our loyal bodyguard, protecting us from harmful UV rays and other dangers from space. Without oxygen, we would be defenseless against space threats. Oxygen also has a fascinating role in shaping the weather. It teams up with its other atmospheric buddies to make the sky go wild with tornadoes, hurricanes, and thunderstorms. They mix and mingle in the air, creating just the right conditions for these exciting weather adventures to happen. And these adventures can be dangerous, but they serve an important purpose. They help distribute nutrients and organic matter, carrying soil, leaves, and debris to new places. So what if we decided to mess with nature and crank up the oxygen levels to crazy heights, 30%, 40%, or even 50%? Well, too much of a good thing can become dangerous. Oxygen toxicity is when too much of this gas causes big problems. It's like eating loads of candy. It's fun at first, but soon enough you'll regret it. Surprisingly, an overdose of oxygen can leave you struggling for breath, like a tired dancer in desperate need of a break. At first you might feel a burst of energy, but it doesn't last. Dizziness sets in, as if you've been spinning on the dance floor for hours without stopping. In extreme cases, too much oxygen can even harm your body, making you feel like you've crashed into a huge truck. So while oxygen is always with us, giving us life, it's important to appreciate its delicate balance. Don't put on your special breathing gear. Also, we wouldn't be the only creatures to suffer from this oxygen extravaganza. Mammals, for example, will struggle to adapt to these extreme levels. The balance of power among species will change drastically, and winners and losers will fight for survival in a world that's spinning out of control. And we'll need stronger shelters to deal with these gigantic animals. We'll have to stay nimble and avoid danger. Amidst all the chaos, there will be astonishing adaptations. Birds will fly higher than ever before, reaching heights that would amaze even the clouds. Also, get ready for more natural disasters and delicate ecosystems hanging in the balance. Fires will start quickly and rage fiercely, making wildfires a constant threat. Even a small spark from a campfire could cause disaster. We'll need to rethink our cooking and heating methods to stay safe in this oxygen-filled world. But let's not forget the other side of the oxygen story. If we had a planet with low oxygen, only around 15%, we would face a completely different struggle. Every breath would be difficult, leaving us tired and struggling for air. Physical activity would become extremely hard, and our memory and focus would suffer. So let's be grateful for the oxygen levels we have now. They're the perfect balance for us to thrive. In this exhilarating journey through an oxygen-rich world, we've experienced breathtaking wonders and discovered the delicate balance of our planet. Let's cherish the magic in every breath, respect the interplay of oxygen and life, and embrace the thrill of this remarkable ride called life. Are you sure that it was an asteroid that caused the extinction of dinosaurs? There's this huge drama about why these horrifying creatures disappeared. It's a big deal in both science and movies. But what really happened to the dinos? How do scientists figure it out? And why does it even matter? Let's see. Let's take a trip back to England in 1842. There was a scientist named Sir Richard Owen. He was checking out some huge reptile fossils and noticed that 3 of them, Megalosaurus, Iguanodon, and Hylaeosaurus, had a lot in common. So he had this light bulb moment and decided to combine all these creatures into Dinosauria, which means terrible lizards in Greek. The scientists were studying dinosaurs and grouping them based on their looks. But then Charles Darwin showed up and gave even a better idea. Turns out, species don't just appear out of thin air, they evolve. And now, everyone had to rethink how they were defining dinosaurs. They came up with a new idea called phylogenetic classification. Picture a big family tree with all creatures ever. Somewhere up there, we find Megalosaurus and Iguanodon, and we say all dino descendants come from their common ancestor. It's like tracing back your family tree, and if we go far enough, we find the ultimate dino ancestor. Sounds like a plan. But then, things got a bit complicated. When we talk about dinos, we've got the ones with feathers and beaks and the ones without. That's when we found out that birds are cousins to certain dinosaurs, maybe even evolved from them. After learning that, scientists had to look at the bird family tree and rethink the dino definition. In the end, they decided that birds are kinda dinosaurs, but not exactly. Confusing, huh? But in any case, now we have two groups. The first one is birds, and the other one is non-avian dinosaurs, which are extinct. That means now we have to reconsider our question. Instead of asking what caused the extinction of dinosaurs, it should be what caused the extinction of non-bird dinos. The answer might seem simple. People often think of a gigantic space rock as the dino destroyer. It's probably the first thing that pops into your mind. Even Google and other search engines agree on this one, like best friends copying each other's homework. History teaches us that about 66 million years ago, dinosaurs totally vanished, except for the ones that became birds. Of course, the truth is more complicated. And not all dinos vanished in one go. Some went the natural way, and there were many extinctions here and there during their time on Earth. But the big event we're talking about looks like a movie scene change. Like suddenly changing the channel on a TV. One poof. And the Earth went from the time of dinosaurs to the time of mammals. Scientists call these time periods the Cretaceous and Paleogen. We even give this special event a nickname, the KPG, or KT extinction. Some even refer to it as the 65 million years ago event, even though the more correct number is 66 million years ago. We've got two main theories in the spotlight: asteroids crashing and volcanoes erupting like crazy. Let's talk about the asteroid idea. So, around 66 million years back, imagine a humongous asteroid smacking into Earth. This thing was about 6 miles wide, about as big as Mount Everest. It zoomed through the sky super fast, like a mountain going 100 times the speed of sound. And when it hit, it released a ton of energy. It crashed down in what's now southern Mexico, near a spot that's tied to the dinosaur extinction story, Chicxulub crater. Everything close to the impact was zapped into vapor in a snap. Picture the biggest energy burst in ages, like 1 billion years or more. Nothing near the crash site stood a chance. Next, there was the aftershock. As the fireball cooled down, the Earth's surface went bonkers. The ground twisted and shook, causing unimaginable earthquakes. The continents became huge, bouncy castles. And then, the stuff that got blasted up by the impact came raining back down like a rainstorm. Even if you weren't near the huge pieces falling in Mexico, you'd get hit by these smaller, super hot bits flying through the air. This made the air so toasty that forests burst into flames all around the world. Are you ready for more? Time for a massive tsunami. The ocean floor got all churned up, pushing waves inland around the Gulf of Mexico. But just imagine, even all that wasn't enough to destroy all the dinosaurs. For example, dinos in New Zealand were pretty fine, but we know that they all went extinct, so what happened to them? They felt a little rumble, and suddenly, the sky started getting all dark and gloomy, as if it was nighttime. And hold up, what's that? A blanket of ash is slowly creeping around the whole planet. Now, here's where the real drama happens. The big problem with the asteroid crash wasn't the instant boom you might think. It's all about the long-term effects. Imagine the stuff that got blasted up into the sky blocking the sunlight. Days turn into nights, and temperatures drop very sharply. A lot of plant-eating dinosaurs passed away, and hunters were having a great feast, but not for too long. Without sunshine, the food chain falls apart very quickly. Then, the ash falls back to Earth. Things go from bad to worse. Other nasty stuff starts floating around in the air like carbon dioxide. This carbon dioxide mixed with shattered seafloor bits makes the temperature go wild. The Earth was playing hot and cold all at once. That's when somewhere between 50 and 80% of dinosaurs said goodbye forever. What's even more sad is that this number only counts the species themselves. If we look at the number of individual animal lives lost, it's even higher. You might think that at least the poor mammals finally got their chance after the dinos left. But even mammals had a tough time. We are very lucky that a few brave mammals managed to survive this crazy chaos. The ones who made it were like the little champs with speedy energy systems, flexible diets, or secret hideouts. But this story is only one hypothesis. Next, we have the volcanism hypothesis. Volcanoes. These fiery mountains are used to spitting out molten rock and causing epic destruction. But surprisingly, this theory isn't about explosive eruptions. Nope. It's about something sneakier and slower. Around 1 million years before the Dino Doom, there's this big change happening under the Earth's surface. Way below where India's floating, a rock river starts forming, heating things up. And then, India gets hit hard. It turns into a sea of lava, like a fiery ocean. It's like a gazillion of dump trucks filled with lava slowly pouring out. These solidified leftovers are known as the Deccan Traps, like a super deep layer of hard lava covering a piece of land the size of France. And just like in our asteroid story, the real trouble comes from the air. For hundreds of thousands of years, sulfur dioxide spread like an unstoppable shadow. It was making the sky gloomy and the rain toxic. Food sources turned into poison, and oceans became acid baths. And then, carbon dioxide took the stage. It was like a temperature button, flipping the Earth's climate upside down. It was a roller coaster of chaos. The ecosystems were stressed, food chains snapped, and species waved goodbye one by one. Both theories seemed pretty realistic. All the experts were having a big debate about which theory was correct and why the dinos disappeared. So, what is the real answer? Unfortunately, we don't know. Some scientists support one theory, some support the other one, and we're left scratching our heads. But hey, don't be too hard on the media or the scientists. They're all doing their best to figure out the mystery of the dinosaurs' disappearance. And maybe one day, we'll finally learn the real answer. So, stay tuned.
It was a 40 feet long and 12 feet tall beast, the king of dinosaurs. Its massive and muscular body weighed up to 8 tons. Its serrated teeth were sharp, and its jaws had a bite so strong they could crush a car. The creature had 2 powerful legs. It lived in forested river valleys all across North America, almost 70 million years ago. I'm talking about the most famous movie star among dinosaurs, T-Rex. It was very smart, with a brain twice as big as that of any large meat-eating dino. It was slower than other hunters, developing a speed of up to 12 miles per hour. Its other weakness was its small arms. Some scientists think they were just an evolutionary leftover, like the pelvic bones of some snakes. But others believe T-Rex used its arms to hunt. Its 4-inch claws helped the animal out. T-Rex was undoubtedly frightening, but surprisingly, there were even scarier dinosaurs in the past. Around 100 million years ago, there was a giant creature with the name that meant a spine lizard. It was Spinosaurus, the largest carnivorous dino. It was bigger than T-Rex and could grow almost 60 feet long. Its weight could be as great as 22 tons. The animal had long spines on its back. They could grow up to 7 feet long and were connected by folds of skin. They formed something that looked like a sail. Some scientists think it was a hump Spinosaurus used to store water. This dino had dense bones and short hind limbs. Researchers believe that these dinos could use their flat and wide-clawed feet for paddling. This was the first dino that could ever swim. Unfortunately, it couldn't process smells like most other theropods. These were a group of 2-legged carnivorous dinosaurs that appeared on Earth 230 million years ago. That's why the animals the creature hunted could hide from it on land. The Spinodino spent most of its time in the water. It roamed the swamps of North Africa and mostly fed on fish, big prehistoric sharks, and sometimes other dinosaurs. It had a long, thin, and narrow snout like a crocodile. Unlike other dinos of its kind, which had curved teeth, Spinosaurus had conically shaped straight teeth. Giganotosaurus, which is the Greek word for giant southern lizard, was considered the largest meat-eating dino until Spinosaurus was found. It lived around 100 million years ago in South America, around 30 million years before T-Rex appeared there. It was longer and taller, but more slender than T-Rex. And while T-Rex had 2 fingers, this giant had 3. It walked upright on its 2 big and very strong legs. Its tail was pointed and thin, which helped the creature make fast turns while running and keep its balance. The animal could move at a speed of up to 31 miles per hour. T-Rex's maximum speed was 25 miles per hour at the most. Any faster than that, and the giant could lose its balance and fall over. Giganotosaurus had 2 arms with sharp claws. It was mostly an opportunistic meat eater, feeding on everything it found on its way. Its bite wasn't as strong as T-Rex's, but it still managed to deal with some bigger animals, like herbivore dinosaurs. Maybe there was even an Argentinosaurus among them, the biggest animals ever found. It's hard to imagine how Giganotosaurus could take down a 50-ton beast on its own. That's why scientists think they may have hunted in groups. The animal's only weakness was its small brain. It was twice smaller than T-Rex's. This means the T could at least win a chess game. Big retractable sickle-shaped claws in the creature's feet are great for cutting. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Utahraptor. That's a mini T-Rex that lived 125 million years ago. If a big T-Rex was coming for you, you could hide under a rock or some other place where it wouldn't be able to reach you. But there would be no place where its mini version couldn't follow you. Discovered in Utah, strong, toothy, and armored with huge claws, more than 9 inches long, an adult Utahraptor was 20 feet long and 5 feet tall at the hip. These creatures were covered in feathers. This is why fully grown animals look like gigantic turkeys. The Utahraptor's main weakness was their size. They were a bit smaller than many other dinos, but these guys made up for that by hunting in packs. Allosaurus, which means a different lizard in Greek, was a massive carnivore reaching 40 feet in length and weighing 2 tons. It roamed the Earth around 150 million years ago. Similar to T-Rex, this dino had strong back legs and a large snout. Its mouth was full of sharp teeth. The animal easily lost them when eating, but they usually grew back. Allosaurus was already fully grown by the age of 15, and its lifespan was around 28 years. The creature had a short neck and a long, narrow skull, disproportionately big compared to the rest of its body. This dino also had a pair of horns above its eyes and ridges along the top of its nasal bones leading to those horns. Allosaurus chased big herbivore dinosaurs. When several Allosauruses gathered in a group, they could take down even such colossal creatures as Apatosaurus. But scientists still doubt if they could cooperate, because these dinos were generally not too friendly toward one another. Some of the animal's bones had an hourglass shape, which made them lighter and reduced their strength. They were similar to the hollow bones modern birds have. Another weakness of this dino was its bite. It was less powerful than that of some modern animals, like lions, alligators, or leopards. Scientists think Allosaurus may have used its skull as a hatchet. The Rhizinosaurus was one of the freakiest dinos out there. It lived 100 to 60 million years ago. It had a very small head and bizarre feet with 4 toes, unlike their ancestors that had 3. Its body was covered with feathers. This weirdo had the longest claws scientists have ever recorded. They were 3 feet long each. These claws were curved and sharp. The dino used them to collect plants for lunch. Scientists are still not sure if this creature was a herbivore or carnivore, or both. The dino had a long neck. There were no teeth in its upper jaw. Its wrist bones were like the ones modern birds have. The Rhizinosaurus might have evolved from a meat-eating to plant-eating animal throughout time. Unfortunately, in comparison with meat-eaters, herbivore dinosaurs were much weaker, and still, those claws could make its enemies think twice. High-spined lizard, or a Crocanthosaurus, lived 110 million years ago. It was 2 feet shorter than T-Rex but had a similar body structure. Like T-Rex's, these creatures often went after bigger and more challenging animals. For example, with those backbones so hard, it seemed as if they were carrying a giant turtle shell, like Ankylosaur. The high-spined lizard was very territorial. It had a brain shaped like the letter S and an excellent sense of smell. What made a Crocanthosaurus vulnerable was its small arms. And still, the creature used them to hunt other animals surprisingly well. The dino pulled its catch close to its torso, which was like a hug you wouldn't be able to escape from. Diplodocus lived 150 million years ago. The 90-foot-long creature was possibly the longest dinosaur ever. Its tail, which could reach 46 feet in length, was the longest tail of any animal ever. And its neck was more than 20 feet long. The underside of the dino's tail had 2 rows of bones, which made the creature even stronger and more mobile. Diplodocus didn't look scary, long-necked, gentle, peacefully munching on plants, until it used its tail like a whip, making even the scariest meat-eaters back away. This tail was the center of the dino's mass, which was why Diplodocus could move very quickly. Scientists first thought, this is a lizard-like animal, but its posture was more like that of an elephant. Plus, Diplodocus had nasal openings on its forehead. The dino's weakness was its small teeth and weak force bite. Quetzalcoatlus was the biggest flying animal ever. It lived 70 million years ago and controlled the skies of North America. It was a toothy, pin-headed creature with a blunt snout. It was as tall as a giraffe and weighed 550 pounds. Quetzalcoatlus had a small torso and long neck and legs. Its wings were short compared to the rest of its body, but still long enough to stretch for 40 feet. Scientists think this animal could fly at a speed of up to 80 miles per hour and travel 400 miles in a day. This dino was weaker than, let's say, T-Rex or most other carnivores of that time, but it had powerful muscles, which helped the animal rise into the air in the blink of an eye.
You decided to go scuba diving for the first time. The water is clear and the sun is shining on the seabed. You take a few selfies and the fish swimming by when suddenly the ocean goes pitch black. You look up and, oh my, what is that gigantic animal? It's definitely not a shark, not a whale. Is it a turtle? Yup, but fear not, it's not gonna hurt you. If you had lived on this same Earth about 72 million years ago, then maybe this could have really happened to you. Scientists have recently found the fossils of a gigantic marine turtle that could have grown as big as 12 feet. If you don't have any idea of how big that is, let's see some examples. That's the average length of a hippopotamus, 6 golden retrievers, or 2 Michael Jordans stacked on top of each other. The turtle's scientific name is an homage to that old-school sea monster called Leviathan. Maybe you remember this from old-school history lessons. The Leviathan is supposedly a mythical creature that would swallow entire ships or people that were deemed too greedy by the creature. Can you imagine being swallowed by this humongous sea turtle? No, thank you. The fossils of this gigantic creature began to be excavated between 2016 and 2021, all the way in northeastern Spain. The first fossil was located by a hiker in the Spanish Pyrenees, and it was around 8 inches long. The pelvis of this turtle alone measured around 35 inches. It would definitely be one of the biggest turtles today if it hadn't gone extinct. FYI, the largest living sea turtles today can reach up to 6 feet in length, which is already pretty big. Now, how about a gigantic prehistoric scorpion? I bet most people here are not huge fans of these creatures, especially since they're poisonous, which is why the thought of a 9-foot-long aquatic scorpion might be the stuff of nightmares. Let's just say that if they hadn't gone extinct some 400 million years ago, lakes and rivers would be much more dangerous places for humans today. These gigantic insects were considered to be apex predators in their time, hunting everything from fish to other animals, even of their own kind. Yikes! I got goosebumps just imagining these creatures. Should we thank the asteroid that hit our planet now or later on in this video? Another prehistoric animal that would shock humans if it were still alive is the so-called megatherium, a gigantic sloth. This huge sloth is believed to have grown up to 20 feet long, and its weight could be up to 8,000 pounds. It was found in the woodlands and grasslands of South America. The creature used to stand on its 2 feet in order to reach leaves on high branches. These giant sloths had huge claws. They helped them climb trees. I gotta say, I feel uncomfortable imagining these elephant-sized sloths climbing trees. Oh, of course, some dinosaurs will make our super-sized creatures list. But before that, here's a fun fact. Did you know some dinosaurs are still alive today? Scientists have proven that birds are classified as theropod dinosaurs. Such infamous creatures as the T-Rex and Velociraptor belonged to this group. I'm sure you've heard these names even before you watched Jurassic Park. The Velociraptor is that scary dino that breaks into the kitchen. Well, they evolved, gained some feathers, and turned into various species of birds we know today. That means that any bird from chickens to those little blue ones is a direct descendant of dinosaurs. Now, does the name Spinosaurus ring a bell? You can see this huge dinosaur in some museums today. Its fossils, I mean. The Spinosaurus was one of the biggest land predators to walk Earth. Actually, to walk its land and water, since scientists believe that this dino was semi-aquatic. It fed mostly on meat, which means humans would be its natural prey if it lived today. This meat-eating dino lived around 90 to 100 million years ago. It was about 60 feet long, 12 feet high, and weighed up to 22 tons. Its head was around the size of 8 bowling balls and was shaped like a crocodile's face. Basically, the Spinosaurus was a big African elephant with the face of a crocodile. Just kidding. But that would look funny though, wouldn't it? A much more attractive dino was this guy. It's considered to be the largest dinosaur that has ever lived on our planet. What made it so big was its extremely long neck and very long tail. You wouldn't want to stand behind this creature, believe me. If it decided to swish its tail, you'd get catapulted very far away. This creature lived around 100 million years ago, and its fossils were first found in Argentina around 2012. The dino measured 120 feet from head to tail, which made it almost as big as an American football field in width. And have I mentioned it weighed almost as much as a space shuttle?